Good morning, all. Welcome. A little impromptu stream because I was running through my feed and, yeah, with a D, not a T, and saw that a lady who meant a lot to me when I was a young man is having a sentencing hearing today. It's well, at one point, she was the most downloaded lady on the interwebs. Back when you had a dial up modem and you had to wait for 10 minutes to see the final picture, this lady was the most downloaded woman. She's a former valet, as they're called in the WWF at the time. Today it's WWE. She was known as Sunny for the catchphrase "What Sonny wants, Sonny gets," and today she will get her sentencing in a deadly DUI case. She could potentially get 27 years in prison after pleading no contents to charges for her deadly DUI. So I thought I would jump into this and watch this because it's a slow Monday. And again, she had a big cultural impact on a young man. Talking about having a big impact on a young man. Good morning, Luna. Hey, Danny T, Kim, Jude. No, I didn't know her personally, but back in the mid 90s, most guys knew this lady. She she was very famous for young men who watched the WWE back in the day when it was the WWF. She has fallen on very rough times since then. She has multiple run-ins with the law. She famously had a big drug habit when she was at the WWE. She had, I think she was either married or dating a guy called Chris Candido, and they were doing what's called somas. It's a downer. A lot of wrestlers took them back in the day, and uh, and she was willing to do whatever to get those pills, even though her boyfriend also worked in the company. There was a lot of rumors about her and other very famous wrestlers, one of which might be from Canada and using is he using a figure four? No, he's not using a figure four leg lock. But he was very famous back in the day as well. Um, and maybe the born again Christian Shawn Michaels might have had his sunny days, as they said in a very famous promo. But this lady fell on hard times. She ended up in a really bad spot in her life, and was massively addicted to drugs. So it's not as fun a story as it could be, but and especially because today she is waiting a sentencing in a deadly DUI case. There won't be any trial as such. There will be two witnesses for the defense talking about her mental and physical disabilities. She, as I said, pled no contents. So she didn't admit to doing it, but she didn't want to put up a defense for it either. But the two witnesses we will hear are a forensic and clinical psychiatrist that will testify. It's not clear which mental disorder they will testify about. She claims that she has been diagnosed with PTSD, borderline, and bipolar when she entered her plea agreement. Her defense asked for a downward departure in this case, but she could potentially land up to 27 years. Yeah, 27 years, but the motion from the defense is 10 and a half years because she requires specialist treatment. So I thought I would cover it, and the hearing has begun. I'm a little late to pick it up. I'm sorry, but we will get into it and we will catch up as we always do. But yeah, it's a sad departure from a woman who was on the top of the world, got into a bad spot with drugs, and now potentially can go away for 27 years. Hey, Pixie. Hey, before I go, Shaquille, I haven't heard about. I knew she had had an accident. I remember reading about it, and it happened back in March last year. And I remember I saw, oh my God, Sonny's in the headlines again because she hasn't been out of the headlines, and all of it has been because uh, she has had a lot of trips to prison. She famously made a few nature films as well. One Day in Sunny, believe one of them, or One Night in Sunny, or something like that, was one of them. Never watched it. She tried to do the Smolies Mans, and today she will face the music. She hit the wall, then the wall fell on her, and she tumbled down the rocks after that. But let's try and see what will happen. If I can find the right feed. Doop. It's full screen. I think I'm just gonna make sure I boost it. It's a very bad audio as always, so enjoy, and let's see where it goes. As you can see, I showed you the picture before from when she was one of the hottest ladies in the WWE, and this is how she looks 20 years later after a massive drug abuse, alcohol abuse life. So it's a sad story to actually tell, but that's life. Wrong choices can lead you down a very dark path. Well, I won't cry. Good morning, farm girl mom. We can skip ahead a bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, all rise.
Good morning.
Especially if you're addicted to pills and drugs, life gets harder for each day, and that's sadly what happened to this. Well, she's not a young lady anymore, but yeah. Uh, did I spell her name wrong? I probably did. Yeah, it's Sytch. Sorry, Lefty. Thank you, Lefty. I'll try to change it after. Good morning, MG.
Here for sentencing for Tamara Sytch.
Lefty's always yelling at me.
This is State versus Tamara Sytch, 22-302-084. I just want to put a few things on the record before we get started. Defendant previously entered an open plea. I think the only agreement was the time served on the misdemeanors. So essentially, this court has an open plea on the second-degree felony and the third-degree felony. Defendant did waive PSI at the time of sentencing. The attorney stipulated the court reviewing a number of things in preparation for today. Of course, the state did file a memorandum of sentencing citing the Gabriel case. Defense filed a memorandum requesting a downward departure. Both parties agreed that I could review the letters from various friends and family members for both sides, which I have reviewed. At the time of the sentencing, we filed for information purposes a score sheet. Defense objecting to that score sheet at all?
No, Your Honor, we're not objecting to any points on the score sheet. We will have an argument regarding the Gabriel case at a later time.
I'm sure you will.
But as it stands, we do not object.
Stitches get stitches. Yeah. She's been into a lot of problems. You are mid to late 90s resting valets now.
But they're going to be time served.
Yes, just so that she receives credit on her.
Okay. All right. Generally speaking, the state goes first with the party of the burden of proof. Sometimes on sentencing, based on different situations, I take it in a different order. I understand the defense has filed some experts as witnesses. I think the state, is it the state's FDLE witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
So the state has an FDLE witness. So I don't know, have you all talked about how you would like to deal with the timing?
We have, Judge, we've agreed that defense is going to go ahead and go first as far as evidence purposes based on their doctors. Our FTLE analyst will be appearing via Zoom, and he's under no time constraints.
Okay. All right, so defense is represented by Jessica Roberts and Larry Avalone. State's represented by Ashley Twilliger and Helen Schwartz. And with that understanding, are you all waiving any sort of opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Judge.
All right, go ahead, Jones.
Your Honor, we did have one brief matter if we can approach. Sure.
Well, The Dark Knight Returns. I think you can YouTube, just write in her name. It might pop up. And I'm sorry you don't want to watch it here, but thank you so much for asking.
Call Dr. John Fabian.
Is that somebody who's live with them?
He is, Your Honor.
The only Zoom person I'm aware of is the FDLE person. Is that accurate?
I think it's one of the Fox channels. Well, it's just good customer service. When they talk nice about you, you give them a little help.
All right, sir, did you have to be sworn? If you could just step in front of the clerk for just a moment, please.
Raise your hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
All right, if you have a seat on the witness stand, please be careful to step.
Recording
I'm
in
a-
progress.
All right, so of course, we've started the proceeding. I have just turned on Zoom. Our first witness, so go ahead.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Exactly before I go.
Sure, my name is John Matthew Fabian.
What do you do for a living?
I practice as a forensic psychologist and a neuropsychologist.
And where did you go to school starting with college?
So I went to University of Cincinnati, earned a bachelor's degree there in political science, psychology, a master's degree in general psychology. And then I attended Chicago School of Professional Psychology, earning a master's and doctorate both in clinical psychology. And then should I keep going?
Sure.
Attended Cleveland Marshall College of Law, earned a law degree. I have a postdoctorate certification in clinical neuropsychology from the Fielding Graduate Institute, and then a 2-year fellowship in clinical neuropsychology from the University of New Mexico School of Medicine in Albuquerque.
And you completed fellowship training?
I did in nurse.
Well, he's just giving his credentials.
And did you spend very long
Shaquille,
training in forensic psychology, psychiatry?
yeah,
and law?
when you
I
live a
did, so
life,
I
she lived off
participated
booze
in
and
the,
pills.
Case Western.
So, and remember back when she was in the
School of
WWE, she
Medicine,
was,
forensic psychiatry fellowship program. and training.
that was what,
Do you hold
30
any
years ago,
I
and
do.
she lived that very
Licensed,
high
as a psychologist
intensity
in,
lifestyle.
8 states, I'd say.
So,
Florida, Texas,
she fell off a
Ohio,
cliff.
New York,
Hey, Fedorowski.
Illinois, Oklahoma,
Hey, Iris.
Louisiana.
And are you board certified?
I am.
In what areas are you board certified?
Board certified in clinical psychology and forensic psychology.
Well,
What is board certification?
just let people ask their questions, and if I get annoyed, I'll send Iris after them. But again, as one more day said, before I go, sorry, not one more day. Everything is in interaction. So even people saying stuff like that, it just means I get viewers that is not normally here.
It just means that
She
I
wasn't on roids.
trained essentially as high as I could in those particular fields.
Maybe I can put a
So
picture
I
of
have
this
to
time.
pass different written oral exams and submit practice samples in which you're essentially grilled by other board certified experts in that particular field. And they basically cover your area, your supplements of your reports, clinical forensic practice, the law, as well as ethical issues within the field.
Are all psychologists board certified?
No.
And are you currently a faculty member anywhere?
Yeah, so I teach at lecture, basically psychiatry residence in 3 different programs. So one is University of Texas Medical School in Houston. The other one is at Walter Reed. We have a forensic psychiatry psychology fellowship, as does Stanford University. So the latter 2 are in forensic psychiatry and psychology.
If people want to try and see, this is 2011 when she was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And since then, she has been in and out of prison constantly. And for this one, she slimmed down quite a bit. She had been getting really big, but as Fed says, the liver is the part of your body that cleans everything. And when it goes, all the bad stuff just keeps stacking up in your body.
And are you on any editorial boards or journal reviews?
I am, yes.
And have
Hey,
you
Holly,
published
long
in
time no
review?
see.
I have,
Have you published book chapters?
yes,
And how about peer-reviewed journals?
I have,
And what about bar journals?
yes.
And can you list just generally a few of the areas that you've published in?
Well, particular publications, book chapter 2023, Forensic Neuropsychological and Neurological Evaluation of Violence, Scientific and Legal Perspectives, and that's in the Litigator's Handbook of Forensic Medicine, Psychiatry, and Psychology. Another one is this year, Criminal Responsibility and Legal Insanity, and that's in a book entitled Forensic Psychology, Criminal Justice Law, Interventions.
And can you briefly summarize your training and work experience?
Sure. So I started off in Chicago. I was at Cook County Jail, and I worked with inmate populations there in the psychiatry division. So there's about 1,000 inmates of 11,000 that were in the mental health unit. And I evaluated and started learning mental health there, learning how to administer and interpret psychological testing. Then I spent a year at the Federal Bureau of Prisons in Chicago. Did assessments, mostly therapy and treatment. And then I moved back to my home state of Ohio. And I was an intern resident there, forensic psychology resident, and I was at Medical College of Ohio. And in that state, they had a dozen, I'd say, court psychiatric clinics, either in cities or regions. And I was a director, well, first of all, I trained in one of them in Northwest Ohio. So we were examining pretrial pre-sentence evaluations. And then I eventually was a director of a court psychiatric clinic. So in that state, I worked at 4 of them. There are 3 adult and 1 juvenile. I was conducting, pretrial pre-sentence evaluations, risk assessments, dispositional evaluations. I started doing
Just
Minnesota.
skip ahead until he
And
starts
so
talking about the
whole
file.
state of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And then neuropsychology training. I was in a urban area in Ohio, neurology and neuroscience associates, and that was TBI, go into a fellowship.
He really likes to talk about his degrees.
Types of,
You mentioned TBI, is that a traumatic brain injury?
that is,
And do you currently have your own private practice?
I do, should it in Central Texas, I would say,
In what areas do you currently specialize in?
yes, so I do a fair amount of, as far as the part of employees that may be at risk of harm to self or others, evaluate neuropsychological or psychological evaluations, make sure they're fit to, no,
Prosecution. And do you solely evaluate defendants for the defense?
no,
And do you receive prosecution referrals through the courts?
yeah, yes, I had
And is that for both defense and prosecution?
a 5,000 plus, 800 plus.
And approximately how many times have you testified in court?
600. I have
And hourly rate in this case?
350.
And approximately how many hours would you say you work in this case?
I would say 25.
And Your Honor, at this time, we would offer Dr. Tammy the witness confidence to offer opinions in the area of psychology, both forensic and clinical.
Reciprocal discovery, was there an agreement on that, on opinion testimony?
Judge, I don't think there's specifically, but for purposes of this hearing, the state has no objection to Dr. Fabian offering.
So Dr. Fabian, what were you asked to do?
Okay, now we are where he's gonna talk. So I am just gonna go back to Food Ferry. A few people has come in after I did my intro. This case is about the former valet in the WWF, Sonny, Tammy Sytch. She pled no contents to a deadly DUI back in 2022. Today is just her sentencing hearing. There will be 2 defense witnesses and maybe 1 from the state to talk about her mental state and her physical state. She, back in the 90s, when Lefty was a young man, she was known as the most downloaded woman on the internet. She was a very famous, very, very pretty young lady, kind of the girl next door type. But she had a massive drug habit already back then. There was a lot of rumors about her sleeping with all the WWF superstars at the time, cheating on her husband. Later, she got out of the wrestling business, got into adult entertainment. She tried her luck with a little Honey Hands, and since 2011, she got inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame. But since then, she's just been in and out of prison. It's a really sad story when you see it. But this case is a deadly DUI. She pled no contents, so there won't be a trial. There will just be this hearing, and then she will get a sentencing. She can potentially get 27 years in prison. The defense have asked for a lesser sentence of 10 and a half years on the background of her physical and mental problems. Yeah, some experts really like to talk about them when they're in court. Hey, Paige M. And anyone, Lexi is here. Oh, happy birthday to Lexi. 25 years old today. Happy birthday. And Christine is here. Welcome.
With regard to, Tammy's Sytch.
Well, to conduct the psychological evaluation, trying to determine mental health conditions, psychiatric diagnoses, conduct psychological testing, and also look at neuropsychological assessment, functioning, looking at neurocognitive strengths, weaknesses. That issue, because of history of seizures, concussions, and also really to look at potential mitigating circumstances that may be relevant with these issues.
And approximately when were you retained by the defense?
It would have been in the spring of 2023.
And do you rely on records and reports of others concerning a patient's past history in order to formulate your opinions?
I do, yeah.
And did you review a collection of records to assist in your evaluation of Tammy?
Yes,
And what records did you review that were relevant to your analysis and opinions?
sure. So I had reviewed certainly the police reports in this case, prior police reports. I reviewed the Lucea County jail records. There were Garnett medical records for her.
Sorry, when you say prior police reports, you're talking about in regard to this case or previous?
Both,
Can you specify what?
sure. I have County of Carbon, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and Northampton County in Pennsylvania, Ormond Beach Police Department, and there were 2 different records there. I don't know if you need the case numbers.
That's the attorney's name.
And then, about 3 of those different cases through that police department.
All right, go ahead.
And how did the records that you reviewed help inform your opinion, starting with the Garnett records?
I'm gonna ask everybody on Zoom, please make sure that you're muted.
Which record?
The Garnett records?
Sure. So in 2014, Tammy had gone to the hospital for a seizure type episode. She had been prescribed Keppra anti-seizure medication, and she was seen and discharged that same day. The complaint was seizure. And in that record, there was a description of her psychiatric treatment with Xanax, typically for anxiety and selective repression. And there was evidence of depression. And then she had some different medical conditions, thyroid condition and cervical cancer condition.
And regarding the Volusia County jail records, what was notable about that record?
So notable about that was she had been treated with buspirone for anxiety, Prozac for anxiety, depression, had pain relievers, and was diagnosed with back pain, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, hypertension, uncomplicated diabetes 2. She had a history of pancreatitis from the alcoholism.
Irish, as he just said, he didn't just base it on this case alone. Did he mention like 8 or 9 prior case documents he lists he had looked into? She has a massive history of DUIs. She is an addict and has been for a long time.
And history of seizures, convulsions, and then alcohol dependence.
And did she report having any nightmares regarding prior?
Yes, she did report
She's working.
nightmares of being choked, punched, physically assaulted by her most recent partner.
And those nightmares, is that something that would be of interest to you in a PTSD diagnosis?
Yes, that would be more of the intrusive symptom prong nightmares we call flashbacks or intrusive memories.
And did you meet with Tammy?
I did.
Did you meet with her in person?
I did. So I met with her twice, May 30th, May 31st of this year, 2023. And then I met with her again recently on Zoom, video, October 21st, 2020.
So I'd like to talk to you about Tammy's upbringing and her young life. What did you learn from Tammy regarding her upbringing based on her responsibility?
Sure. So I learned this from her sister as well. I talked to Lori Cotton. But I learned that she had 2 sisters and a brother that were about 18 years older, so she was almost like an only child. Her mother struggled with alcoholism before her birth, and then her father struggled with it until about age 10. So there's some chronic alcohol use history with parents. Certainly it's relevant in this case. And then there was also just a lot of quarreling, more verbal, emotional, abusive issues between parents. But as far as Tammy's development, I didn't see any other types of traumatic events, neurodevelopmental conditions or delays. And she had some speech therapies, in childhood, then was able to work through that. And then, she's a gifted student, no history of conduct disorder or oppositional disorder, anger, emotional behavioral problems as a youth. So she was a pretty good student as well.
And did you speak with any collateral sources regarding Tammy?
I did.
And why is it important for you to speak with collateral sources?
I try to do that in many cases, just to get a take on their perceptions of the person evaluating, in addition to just evaluating that person, and then look at consistencies or other factors that maybe I didn't know about.
And what did you learn from the collateral sources regarding a family history of alcoholism?
So I learned again from the sister Lori, who had a different picture because she is much older. That again, their parents at one point or another both struggled with alcohol use and dependency issues, and then I learned, from. I also talked to her good friend Missy. Was it Missy Leslie, I believe, who she knew through the industry, and there's a common theme in addition to what Tammy told me. There's a lot of dysfunctional relationships with men, abusive relationships, use of alcohol, cope with all of this kind of chaos and dysfunction. There's emotional, physical abuse in other relationships where she was a victim to. And then what I kind of term is in this field of learned helplessness, so just continuing to hope things would change. If there's abuse and then there's makeups, then things are going great, and then there's infidelity or there's abuse, and then she would chronically hit the bottom, and then use that as a coping mechanism to deal with all this pain, rejection, abandonment. So these are themes I continue to hear.
She's a chronic alcoholic. Is that a good thing to bring out in a DUI case? Or would the judge say, well, she probably need a long time away to deal with her drinking problem before she can get out and get behind the wheel again?
With Tammy, she's very open and honest about that, but also the 2 individuals that knew her.
And did she also have a sibling with substance abuse?
Yes, her brother also struggled with alcohol use disorder issues.
And speaking to the collateral sources, did you glean any information about her father passing away?
Yes, so I would highlight for the court, there were some heavy hits as far as grief and loss. So there was her father that passed away, I think when she was about 20. Lori's daughter, which would be Tammy's niece, also died in a car accident. And her first serious relationship actually went on and off, mostly on about 16 years. The wrestler Chris Candido also passed away, blood clot, ankle during, after surgery, he flew. And so these are some losses that she really struggled ever getting over.
family members have any belief that Tammy might have some level of mental illness or bipolar disorder?
Yes, Lori did. Lori described Tammy's moods as being extreme, either on top of the world or down in the dumps, deeper than you can imagine. So there are a lot of extremes of mood, which we would consider potentially as a hypomanic or a manic episode in a bipolar disorder, but also areas of like involvement in activities, even risky activities, impulsive activities, where there's a high risk or painful consequences, or there's euphoria, just either she's really on top of the world, tons of energy, tons of activities, or she's a basket case, depressed.
And what did you learn from Tammy about how she can be involved in the wrestling industry?
So she was a good student by report, and informed me that she had received an academic scholarship at the University of Miami in Coral Gables, and she had developed a relationship.
Iris, this is the defense witness. He's a forensic psychologist. As I said, she had pled no contest. So it's just a sentencing, and the defense wanted a downward departure because of her massive psychologically. I need Jamie to say the hard words. Her shrink problems. And that's why we will hear from two defense witnesses today who are both psychologically forensic psychologists who will talk about her massive mental problems. She claims she's been diagnosed as a bipolar. What else was it? Manic depression and a few other things. But again, she's been an addict since the 80s.
With Chris Candido, and they wanted to be together. So she didn't follow through and pursue the Miami education, and they got involved with wrestling. I know that she attended, if I recall, a community college in Connecticut, and then I think it was Monmouth State in that area, Northeast. And then eventually they moved to, I think, Knoxville, and she enrolled at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, stayed in classes, and then got involved with the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Organization. Was working there, and she went through a number of different wrestling organizations. At some point early on, I think around age 21, she was involved with that organization in WWF. Working 3 days, WWF 4 days at the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Organization. Eventually worked extreme wrestling, like WWE. So there was a lot of movement in those organizations. And typically she was working a lot of broadcasting. There was different management. So initially she was not wrestling. Then one organization, you got thrown in the ring, no wrestling. And things were very dysfunctional in that lifestyle on the road. So a lot of drugs, pills, pain meds, and alcohol, from what I understand.
And what had Tammy been going to school for?
But she wanted to study pre-med and was hoping in biology and school.
And when she left school to go into the wrestling industry, was that you, Chris?
Yes.
But again,
And,
every wrestler have a
you
hectic
mentioned
life.
that she
I
wasn't,
believe that
trained to be a wrestler. Was she suffering? some
was it the
injuries?
Undertaker who said he wrestled 360 some days in a year? No,
Yes,
290
at some point,
some days a
she
year.
had lumbar 3, 4, 5 injuries. She had torn, I think, her right quad, her ACL, or she had right knee issues, and then she had some concussions. I believe she reported about half dozen in the industry. And typically, I don't think she ever had medical insurance. And so you're on the road and you just don't get treatment. And in my opinion, at home, she
I'm not talking about the
drank
Canadian crippler today.
alcohol.
He
She
went
had
to the drugs.
restrictions for Xanax as well. Excuse me.
And did Tammy have struggles
As they always say in when you say wrestling is fake, you can't cheat gravity.
with interpersonal relationships?
That she did.
Well, Triple H famously don't do drugs or alcohol. He probably do a little help with his physique, but he doesn't do drugs. That's why the clique always had him around, so he could be the designated driver. But back in the 80s, 90s, it was very, very, very laden with drugs in wrestling companies. And famously, a wrestler did sue them for concussions. I think she might even have been a part of that, but I can't remember she was in the ring in the WWE. I think she was in Extreme Wrestling, but they had no money, so she couldn't sue them. But yeah, constant concussions, especially back when concussion protocols wasn't a thing, that's really hard on the brain. Of course, you can enhance the sound. You can pipe in some audience noise too, if you want. Well, there's no. I never heard about anyone being pulled over for riding on roids. But famously, I listened to a lot of Scott Hall's interviews before he died, and he said that they always hung out with Triple H because he didn't drink, and the rest of the guys did. Yeah, that's why, especially the WWE have increased their TBI protocols, concussion protocols, and banned a lot of the moves who directly would hit the brain. Triple H wasn't on the painkillers either, as he probably was on some, but he didn't do anything. He was very straight-laced, more than some other straight-laced guys. But famously, according to all the guys who ran with him back in the day, said Triple H was a clean guy. So because he was very much into the bodybuilding and getting in bed with this boss, his daughter.
And so starting with her relationship with Chris Medina, what sort of struggles does she have in that relationship?
She struggled with, I think they dated a long time and they were together. They lived together at least 6-7 years. Were together, I think, 16 years. So,
Turn off your phone.
she, they were off and on, and she realized that he was probably the one she reported that really genuinely was consistent, loved her. And she made mistakes in that relationship. It's my understanding she had an extra relationship with another wrestler. And so I think much of the issues in these relationships had to do with just the extremes, the love and the discord, the back and forth.
And her basically throwing away her college career to be with him, is that something that can be symptomatic of mental illness?
Yes, and so she does qualify for borderline personality disorder, okay? And that's going to be a lot of extremes and a volatility in mood and relationships. So there's going to be a real profound sensitivity to rejection, abandonment. Individuals with that disorder typically, they're more prevalent with females, and they feel really hard about a lot of things, especially interpersonal, especially intimate relationships. So there's
Sorry. I know I was told I was something earlier. I feel sad for her. She had massive problems. She had psychological problems. But do borderline disorder allow you to get hammered and rear end a guy who dies? Is this the reason she should do less time in prison? If you know you have traumatic brain injuries, if you know you have psychological disorders, shouldn't you be the first one? I know WWE will pay for your wellness if you go into a treatment. I think they even did it twice for her. But is this the right defense? Yeah. She had psychological problems. That's why she rear-ended a guy. And not talking about rear-ending guys, but look who's here.
Hi.
Hey, Jamie.
Don't bring me in on that comment.
Well, you just popped in when I said it, so.
I know.
So
I mean, right?
people do that without any disorders. Yeah, but it sounds like you should go easy on her because she has problems. She should be more aware that she has personality disorders because she's in treatment for them. And with years of time in prison, she should know better than drunken drive. I would say, in my opinion, it would be an enhancement that she did that. Hey, Sauter.
Hi, guys.
Iris missed you.
I mean, what type? I've been trying to listen as I was in that meeting as best I could, but does she have a traumatic brain injury? Like, did they say that, or is it just this
Well,
like?
he's been talking a lot about his degrees, and then he talked about her bad relationships, that her parents had substance abuse problems. She hung out with the wrong guys and used alcohol to calm it. She was in a long-term relationship with Chris Candido, who sadly passed away because of a blood clot after an operation. Well, she stepped out of him on him a lot. But now he just said, well, she has borderline. That's where he is. That's why I got a little bit upset because that's such a cope out that I did crime because I have a psychological problem. Yeah, but you should be aware you shouldn't drink and drive when you have problems. Happy birthday to you too, Sauter. You and Lexi are both turning 25 today. Congratulations.
Oh, happy birthday, guys, Lexi and C.
25.
I
That's
know.
amazing.
You guys
And
look good for your age.
yeah, you don't look a day over 24.
Nope.
I'm just gonna run to the toilet. Now you're here to look good. Yeah, it's not mental issues, it's the choices that make. But they're gonna bring in 2 forensic pathologists, psychological thingies to say that she has a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Are they trying to make a case that if she does less time, she can then go for treatment? We haven't gone there yet, but they put a brief into the court asking for 10.5 years because she need a massive amount of treatment. She could potentially land 27 years.
I mean, I think that's what we should be doing for her. I mean, I know obviously she's had many chances, I'm sure, to get treatment and get help. But,
Yeah.
you know, just locking someone away without getting them help when they clearly have a problem, you know,
Yeah,
I hope they help her at least. I don't think it negates anything she did.
I want to hear her treatment history.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Because have she had help with this? And as I said, I believe I read somewhere that the WWE have paid for her detox a couple of times.
Well, that's the thing is, unless you are at that rock bottom point where you're going to accept the help, you're never going to accept the help. It's never going to be, it's like, it's one of those things like, what does it take? Where
yeah. Scott Hall and Jake the Snake Roberts, both two famous, very drug-heavy former wrestlers, hit rock bottom multiple times and got to treatment multiple times. And it wasn't until Diamond Dallas Page flew them into his house and tried to help them they got clean.
Yeah.
And it was only because he sat down and talked to them. And even Jake Roberts fell in a few times after that, because it's an addiction. But still, as Bobby says, if you can understand life, you shouldn't drink with anything in your blood. And I think, the entire system locked people away with problems. They do. We need more psych wards for people who has these massive problems. But still, if she had been in treatment, and he said earlier she got Xanax for her anxiety and stuff like that, so she has a lifelong knowledge about her diseases. At what point can you claim I still need to get a preference because I'm sick? When you keep messing up, you should be better. It's
No, I that's just the thing, Bobby. Like, I don't think it's right, because we do lock away all these addicts, and they just sit in jail until their time's up, and then they go out and they reoffend constantly. And I know your decision, you're the one that has to accept the help. But sometimes,
and I don't know if you know, she had like 7 or 8 priors.
Gotcha.
So again, this is just an escalation. She went from maybe DUI and now to a deadly DUI. At what point can you say, well,
you have to
next time she will be better?
That's what I mean. Like, after it's people like this, that it's like, what is it gonna take, man?
Yeah. And she has been on rock bottom and below that multiple times. But I have to run to the head, so I'm just going to start this.
Deep feeling, everything is bated breath, everything is the end of the world, okay? And it's exhausting, okay? And it's a lot of it's love, he hates me, and then you're trying to earn back love, even when that person may be abusive. And so again, there's volatility in mood states and extreme highs and lows with self-image, very unstable self-image, and just impulsive as well.
And borderline personality disorder, that's something that's diagnostic. It's in the DSM, which is basically the Bible for diagnosing these.
Yes, it is a psychiatric disorder. And I would say for the court that is of the 10, let's say, personality disorders, that one rings more like a mental illness than any other one, I would say. One of the top 2 that really is like a mental psychiatric illness.
Is that a mental disorder for which treatment is available?
Yes, absolutely.
And so moving on to her other interpersonal relationships, did she also have some struggles in relationship with a man named John that she had dated?
Yes, so my understanding that he was a police officer, and I would know for the court, she had difficulties being alone. Okay, so she needed someone to fulfill her esteem, and very inadequate, low self-esteem. I mean, one thing's on camera, the other, the real world is just really not feeling good about herself. And so, and she would, I think she was single for about 7 months, met John, police officer, and, this is her report, but that there was death threats to kill her mother, her family. There was physical abuse, and there was a lot of drama, chaos, and dysfunction. And she struggles with getting out of these relationships when certainly they're not healthy. Or she'll get out of them and then get drawn back in. And so that was a major problem. I think there was at least one police report where the police came, they knew John in that area, and she informed me that she lied and said, I fell down the stairs. Just, he didn't want to be arrested for domestic That's my understanding. So there was a lot of that type of chaos. And then, she almost apologized for being abused.
And,
So
did
battered
she
spouse
allow
syndrome as
someone
well.
she received physically abuse?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a pattern. So even during episodes of sobriety, then when there was chaos and abuse, or she felt abandonment, she would drink again. And, self-soothe, certainly self-medicate with alcohol.
And so, were there also struggles in her personal relationship with Damien Darling?
Yeah, so he was in the wrestling business as well, as much younger than her. And then another theme here was that she would find out some of these guys were unfaithful, cheating on her, but then she would want to somehow win them back and would not leave. And that was another typical relationship. Again, we
75-year-old man
self-punishment.
and another driver was injured as well.
And did she
Was
also
this
struggle
just that
in
one
her personal
incident?
relationships with
Yeah, this one is just that one incident.
Yes. So she had met him back up northeast in New Jersey. And, they were often quick move-ins, break up, long-term relationship, it was abusive, back to a new relationship. So there was also infidelity on his part. And, it's my understanding that he was still married and she started drinking again. And then she, I believe, had some troubles with the law, with DUIs up there as well, and was on probation. So a lot of areas of her life were unstable.
And to me, that's not an excuse.
No.
And how did Tammy struggle with her mental health in these relationships?
Well, that's a good question. So, as I kind of said, learned helplessness, low self-esteem, sensitivity, rejection, abandonment, and she didn't have a lot of inner strength to break through those relationships. I'm not going to stand for this. Instead, she would self-medicate, and it was.
We're like 44 minutes behind.
And can you tell us a little bit more about people with borderline personality disorder and how they act in relationships?
Sure. So again, they're often have extremes, and we'll look at volatility and mood.
That's why you don't drink and drive, because it could be
difficulties with unstable
you that
self-image.
hit that person the next
That's not
time.
a good line with fear of
Yeah.
abandonment, rejection. And so when you're struggling to get back into that relationship, there's typically conflict. And, there's
As both Sauter and Luna and a lot of other people are saying, this happens to a lot of women and men every single day. But in a courtroom, it sounds like an excuse that, well, I was in a bad relationship, so I couldn't stop drinking. Well, I've had bad relationships. I have good relationships. I've still known that my car don't run on beer. It runs on petrol. So I should probably not put beer in my car.
Yeah. And my thing was I like to just stay in bed all day and be sad.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
why don't you just do that? Cry it out in your bed alone.
Yeah.
Don't go
Instead of, especially if you have been in a if you have been an addict and then going back to it, you know how you react.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's always find someone who don't drink, or take a cab. It's not that hard.
You would
going
think.
to be problems with anger, with temperament, and there's going to be self-destructive behaviors. Now, she had stated she was never, cut her, never self-mutilated, it was never suicidal, which you often see with serious cases. But she was destructive in other areas. And this would blend into the unstable self-image. At some point, she was using, I think, supplements, steroids in the business like everybody else. The impulsivity with substance use, self-image, you have to work hard and lose your job. So a lot of that was part of the business, but then it blended with her personality. And by borderline personality disorder overlaps quite a bit.
She had to look the part. She never looked anything like she did roids.
Issues with mood and impulsivity in those two disorders.
What other symptoms of
That's pretty much it.
borderline personality disorder does Tammy show outside of her relationships?
Yeah, I would say again, there was just some impulsivity within different areas of her life, and some of it was self-image based, it could be substance abuse based, and she never felt like she was good enough for really anyone.
Low self-esteem,
And
so
what did you learn
it's
about
okay
the
to drink and drive.
relationship, that Tammy was in at the time of the offense in this case?
And it
So
wasn't
her
her.
partner at the time, I think, reached out to her through fan mail, and they, at some point got together. It took a while. They were just writing each other. I don't think they saw any photos of each other for some time, but at some point they got together, and then it was.
It'd be so
quite
nice if the
dysfunctional.
cameraman would stop
And
handling his camera.
like now, this is her self-report to me that there was a lot of emotional abuse and controlling by the partner towards her, and just again rejection, even like threats. If she tried to call the cops, he was trying to even false imprisonment, so to speak, where he wouldn't let her leave. Checking phones, can't go to AA, just constant control. And she was in a number of those types of abusive relationships.
And did that relationship follow the pattern of her other relationships?
Yes.
And what traits did Tammy show that were symptomatic of bipolar disorder?
So those traits at times would be, the irritability, euphoria, problems with sleep, meaning not sleeping, racing thoughts, increasing goal-directed activities, or activities that may be harmful, higher moods. She's working 80 some hours a week, selling gym memberships, a lot of fast pace, a lot of activity level. But then there are times, I think she was with her sister, where she didn't leave the house for weeks and just was almost decrepit with depression. So there was some, I would say, hypomanic episodes and major depressive episodes.
So what does hypomanic mean?
It means that you have symptoms of the highs and the irritability and the accelerated mood behaviors that would not be as serious as a manic episode. Probably
I can see we just bumped a lot of viewers again. If anyone needs an update on the trial, please put it in chat and I'll update you.
intensity and length. Several days instead of a week or weeks.
And is it hard to distinguish bipolar disorder from borderline personality?
Yeah, it is, again, because there's different issues with impulsivity, agitation, irritability, mood issues, but also, and one can be diagnosed with both of them.
And did Tammy ever receive mental health help?
She did, but it was basically with psychiatric medications, and And that would have been depression, anxiety meds like Prozac, Buspar, Paxil. I think she was treated with lithium, which is actually used for both conditions, often bipolar and borderline personality mood stabilizer. And then, but one of the critical pieces in this case is that she, unquestionably needed long-term, individual therapy. I mean, that's how you treat these disorders with medication.
And as a neuropsychologist, are you typically interested in whether an individual has a history of brain damage?
Yes.
And what made you particularly concerned about potential brain damage in Tammy's case?
Sure. So, not every case I do requires a neuropsychological evaluation. This one did. She had some concussions. She reported being choked out before to the point of losing consciousness at least once. And then there was seizure disorder in the records. She reported about 10 of those in her life. And she was actually prescribed, like I said, Keppra for seizures. And,
But all of this is
wrestling,
self-reported. How much brain injury did you observe in the MRIs?
That warranted, in my opinion, neuropsychological assessment.
And what did you learn about Tammy's history of injuries, including head injuries?
Sure. So it's my understanding that she had never fully lost consciousness, but she had, certainly blows to the head where she was dazed. She, again, did not really have medical insurance much for any adulthood. The choke outs could be related to some potential loss of oxygen, to the brain for a brief period of time. She, I don't believe, had treatment for concussions, but she did, at least at the Garnett Hospital, for the seizures. I don't even believe she had gone to the hospital for any domestic battery situation.
Is it typical for individuals who have head injuries not to go to the hospital?
Yes, I would say clinically, forensically, most head injuries are concussions or they're mild and they're self-reported and they're not necessarily treated formally.
And is it also typical for individuals who have experienced domestic violence not to want to report it to the hospital?
Yes, now that gets back to that word of helplessness, certainly.
The information regarding the prior head injuries, is that what led you to conduct neuropsychological testing in this case?
Yes, that is seizures.
And what is neuropsychological testing?
We're just looking at.
Yeah, to me, again, as one said earlier, it's kind of like an expert for hire. She told him, well, I had a lot of concussions, but no medical records of them. Well, I didn't have medical insurance. Well, did you do an MRI scan and see the changes in the brain? Because that was the former wrestler who got very famous for doing the traumatic brain injuries research. He said you could see the changes in the brain with people who have had those traumatic head injuries. So if it's all self-reported, I got knocked in the head a lot when I was a goalie. Sometimes I was dazed. I've been knocked out. So I can drink and drive too, apparently.
Yeah. I don't
No,
like.
no, Lefty. I know they didn't back in the 90s because I think it was 2002 or 5 that guy sued the WWE. But she wasn't an active wrestler either. She wrestled very, very little. So all of these injuries, are they just, again, a way of coping? To me, it just seemed weird that she has so many undiagnosed head injuries.
Mhm.
One's cognitive functioning. So that could be in different areas, typically intelligence, language, memory, attention, perceptual reasoning, executive functioning, emotional perception. That's separate from the psychological assessment for psychiatric disorders.
So I'd like to review the results of your neuropsychological testing. Can you explain to the board what the test of pre-morbid functioning is?
Sure. So that's basically just a reading test, and it gives an estimate of intelligence, and basically it provides maybe an estimate pre-morbid, some type of injury, accident, neurological condition. So she had scored above average 119. It predicted a 112 IQ. She had a 113 IQ, above average range. So she is above average of intelligence. And turning
I'm in the
IQ,
120s.
she had the 4 domains: verbal comprehension, 103 average, perceptual reasoning, 119, above average. And then both working memory and processing speed domains were 111, above average. And so she had a pretty sturdy IQ.
And can you explain to the board how Tammy's attention functioning was assessed and what was notable about those?
Sure. And I'll try to, for brevity purposes, for the court here, but I have, again, we have a 111 for processing speed, working memory to start off with. And then we had some different testing, typically in the average range. Processing speed, we call number letter cancellation testing, above average performance. Processing for trail making testing. Later on we did the CNS vital signs, and that was processing of information and motor speed. That was above average to average. So her attention functioning was intact. Okay. For the most part, average to above average performance. Auditory processing was average. And then I turned to memory.
And what was notable about her results with regards to memory functioning?
Sure. So initially learning word list information that was not structured was impaired, around 5th percentile. But then she was able, delayed recall was above average, although on story, verbal, auditory information that's more structured, she was in the average range for the delayed recall. And then her visual learning and memory was good, so above average ranges. And then as far as language, as noted, the verbal comprehension was in the average range on the IQ test, and her expressive language skills were in the average range. There's no deficits with language.
When you mentioned the 5th percentile, that immediate recall being the 5th percentile, what does that mean?
Well, she struggled with learning unstructured verbal information. Okay, but she was able to somehow retrieve it adequately.
So don't look at her old picture. Look at her new
What does
pictures.
being in the 5th percentile versus being in the 95th percentile?
Well, it means it was impaired, so 95 out of 100 people.
And I have a lot of faith in
And
you,
what was
Sal,
notable
but
with regards to
even you
her
couldn't fix her.
Spatial or perceptual reasoning functioning?
It was intact. So the IQ test, perceptual reasoning domain was above average, and she performed well on a reasoning task on the CNS vital sign, and then she was able to differentiate. Visual discrimination skills were above average, so that was all good as well.
And then most notably, how was her test performance with regard to the executive function?
So the executive functioning in this case was variable, but that's the concern in this case, and that's really kind of our frontal lobes, the higher order reasoning area of our brain. So, and that's where we take hits to the head, so right here. And so we're looking at this case. She had some strengths regarding, on one test of executive functioning, she was average above average. Now on a gambling task, assessing areas of prefrontal cortex that are more responsible for decision-making and impulse control, she was severely impaired, less than 1st percentile. Now, there were concerns as to that performance. And then on a card sorting task, which assesses more of, I would say, kind of problem solving and abstract reasoning, shifting mental set, that was deficient. And that was below average. Her errors were in the 9th percentile. There was some evidence of perseveration, meaning she continued to answer wrong when given feedback. Okay, so these test results here were more concerning for me, especially with kind of more evidence of potential concussive experiences. And so those were concerns. And then she had, she did well above average on a mental literature making test, assessing mental flexibility. Verbal fluency skills were excellent. And then she did report deficits in everyday executive functioning, really about her abilities to appreciate how her behaviors may affect other people, and so more evidence of behavioral kind of dysregulation. So those were more of how she perceived herself in everyday functioning.
Is her report consistent with those impairments that you see in the executive functioning test?
I would say in part, yes.
And was, you indicated earlier, individuals usually experience head injuries, and you indicated here, so you're saying like forehead, front of the.
Yeah, so your frontal lobe, you pull back your forehead and your skull, that's your frontal lobe. And it's really the last area of your brain to develop, but it may be the most important part. And really it has a lot to do with reasoning, decision-making, problem solving. Now she did, she was a bit variable. These tests measure different areas of brain functioning. So the neuropsychological.
I have to say as well, because this is totally unavoidable, totally avoidable.
Yeah.
It's your choice to get behind the wheel, and a wheel is a deadly weapon.
Mhm.
And if you choose, and we heard she had very high not very, she has above average intelligence. She knows stuff. She's just impaired in her decision making skills. It doesn't to me I don't feel like this should be any excuse to do what she did. And again, a 75-year-old man died because I can drive this home. I just close one eye and I can see the road.
And this wasn't a one-time occurrence. She's obviously, this has happened over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So
And
I have a way less sympathy for you when you continue to do it.
exactly. One time where because you didn't know you were impaired because you thought you were fine. You can say, well, that can happen. But constant DUIs, and you know it's a dangerous weapon you are getting in behind. Yeah.
Testing is sensitive to brain dysfunction, but I don't have like a brain scan while I'm doing this. Now these results would warrant me to say, hey, do we, there's enough here to say, brain imaging would be relevant.
And was there anything notable about Tammy's motor functioning effort or emotional perception?
No, she did well on motor functioning, mostly hands, fingers. Her effort was good, so I can't say she was not able to effort or lingering cognitive deficits, and her emotional perception was intact.
So you did not have any concerns regarding malingering in any of the testing that you conducted?
No.
And so we talked about the neurological assessment testing results that assess brain function. Did you also conduct psychological testing in this case?
I did.
And why is that important?
Well, because I'm a psychologist, I study human behavior, and these tests are relevant to psychiatric diagnoses and functioning.
Did you administer the personality assessment inventory?
I did.
And what does that test for?
Yeah, so it measures just assessment of mental illness as well as personality.
And what was notable about Tammy's results?
That it is scored and endorsed, a profile, so to speak, that was consistent with my evaluation. So there's evidence of PTSD, there's evidence of borderline personality disorder, there's evidence of substance use disorder, alcohol, there's evidence of anxiety, depression, and a somatic symptom disorder, somatization. So a lot of preoccupation with health, medical problems, pain, which we know she has a number of them with chronic pain. And treatment for the same bite history. There was also evidence of paranoia, and even potential delusional thinking, which I did not see in my evaluations. I don't sense that she said
And did she also report substance use problems related to alcohol?
Yes, she did.
And did you conduct any additional testing with regard to PTSD?
Yes, a trauma symptom inventory, second edition. There was elevations on different domains of PTSD. So anxious arousal. There was evidence of intrusive experiences, defensive avoidance experiences, dissociative, kind of out of mind body experiences. Again, preoccupation with somatic physical bodily complaints. And overall, our PTSD scale was elevated.
Would those results be consistent with an individual who has PTSD?
Yes.
And did you also conduct the clinical assessment of depression to assess symptoms of depression and anxiety?
Yes, I did. Her total scale, it measures depression and anxiety. Total scale was in the mild range, or range. She rated, I think, mild evidence of depression and anxiety. And that was somewhat similar to the depression, anxiety, and stress scale. So although she reported not as much depression, but then more anxiety, but she had stress in the mild range, a little inconsistency there. And then I administered the neurobehavioral symptom inventory, and there's a lot of physical issues there. She reported to was sad, depressed, irritable, easily annoyed, anxious, a lot of aches, pains, forgetfulness, fatigue, difficulties, all these things. And the pain catastrophizing scale did not indicate what I would say would be psychosomatic pain catastrophizing, symptom report.
So sad to hear that she didn't, Graham.
Well, it means
Yeah,
that
DUI
you
isn't
may
an accident.
report
It's a
lot of
choice.
pain when you don't have a medical condition to support it. So your stress, emotional issues may come out through pain. And I think she has pain, and she did not exaggerate.
And did you review any other testing?
I did, yes.
And what other testing did you review?
So Dr. Danziger, psychiatrist, had seen Tammy after I saw her. There was evidence. He administered a briefer neurocognitive battery called the MOCA. And that was in the average range, less sensitive to the testing I do, to brain dysfunction. The audit AUDIT was an alcohol use scale that was quite high. I would say it's near extreme range. And I think there's a mood disorder scale that may be consistent with hypomanic manic mood scale.
Can you explain to the court just how the MOCA differs from the battery of psychological testing that you administered?
Yeah, the MOCA is a screener, takes a brief time that will assess the different neurocognitive domains like we talked about, but it's not as in-depth or sensitive to brain functioning and dysfunction.
And is the MOCA something that anyone can find and use?
Yeah, it's something that I've used it a couple times with geriatric patients that don't have the stamina to do much more.
So what was your overall impression of Tammy based on all the testing that you conducted?
As far as diagnosis, or?
As far as brain damage and diagnosis.
Well, I mean, I guess you bring up the word damage. I mean, she's a damaged individual, psychologically, emotionally, I would say neurocognitively to some extent, certainly regarding substance use. So, we're looking at, I would say, 3 areas or so where, the emotional, psychological side, she really had this fusion
Hey,
of
Josie.
dysfunction within relationships, dysfunctional mood state, and dysfunctional alcoholism, and they all blended together. And I don't think the blows in the head did any help for her, nor did the chronic alcoholism, the seizures. So there are a number of issues here that we call psychiatric, neuropsychiatric, but also is there treatment, obviously.
And based on your evaluation of Tammy, what did you diagnose her with?
Diagnosed her post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Others specified bipolar disorder, and when I had seen her, it was more currently depressed without psychotic features. Mild neurocognitive disorder due to traumatic brain injury and seizures. Alcohol use disorder, severe. Alcohol intoxication at the time of this offense. Other specified somatic symptom disorder and borderline personality disorder.
And what criteria did you use to diagnose Tammy with bipolar disorder?
So the DSM-5 TR text score edition.
And are there differences between the DSM-5 and the DSM-5 DR?
There are subtle differences. I don't think they were significant. in this case. But I basically thought she had evidence of bipolar. It's probably more, in my opinion, bipolar too. So I just said other specified bipolar related disorder, meaning she has symptoms of that, of bipolar disorder. And some of those symptoms would be at times the grandiosity, euphoria, irritability, problem with sleep, again, heightened activity levels, racing thoughts, goal-directed activity, but also activity that may subject her to painful consequences.
And what information did you have from her past that led you to conclude that she had had a manic episode?
Some of those symptoms also, when I talked to her sister Lori, there was some evidence of just different mood states over the periods that she had talked to her, seen her, or she was involved in her life.
And what information did you have from her past that led you to conclude that she had a depressive episode?
Well, she and her sister had talked about, like, one time when she was living with Lori, that she was just had problems with interest in activities, sat down, low motivation, poor energy, sleeping too much, feeling worthless, down, really sad, depressing for periods of time.
And do you think that it wasn't until your forensic mental health assessment that she was actually fully assessed and properly diagnosed?
No.
Has Tammy ever participated in mental health treatment that has properly managed her mental health disorders?
No.
And would Tammy benefit from mental health treatment tailored to her particular mental health disorders?
Absolutely.
And so the ground that we're seeking a downward departure for is that the defendant requires specialized treatment for a mental disorder that's unrelated to substance abuse or addiction or for physical disability. The defendant is amenable to treatment. So breaking that down, does Tammy have a mental disorder unrelated to substance abuse or addiction?
Yes.
And what disorder is that?
Well, she has psychiatric disorders of, PTSD, bipolar disorder. I would start with those two.
And is she amenable to treatment for these mental health disorders?
Yes.
And how so?
Well, she's been taking psychiatric medications by history dating back years while in jail, and from my understanding, with Dr. Danziger, they have worked on some of these issues well in treatment.
And moving for a moment to her PTSD, did her PTSD appear to have a triggering event?
Yes, it was more related to Chris Candido's death, the grief and loss, death of father, death of niece. Those were heavy hits. And then more recently with her partner that she was involved with, abusive relationships.
And can multiple or chronic traumatic events compound the effects of trauma?
Yes, we call that polyvictimization. And unfortunately, person is perhaps more likely to get involved with these dysfunctional abusive relationships, but they can certainly be compounded with symptoms.
Does Tammy have a substance abuse disorder?
Certainly.
Does she have a mental health disorder separate from her substance abuse disorder?
Yes.
And what are the goals for treatment of a substance abuse disorder?
Well, there's the cognitive behavioral and relapse prevention.
In Denmark, it's you get a lesser sentence if you kill someone with a car while impaired, and I still can't see how they can justify that, because it's your choice. No one forces you to drink and get behind the wheel. You should know that this could happen. That's why you're told about it when you take your driver's license.
And type assessment, treatment, education, and also obviously sobriety.
And what are the goals for treatment of bipolar disorder?
Psychiatric medication management and individual therapy.
And what sort of therapy would you recommend for Tammy specifically for mental health disorders?
So the psychiatric medication management is important. Dr. Danziger will be more specific, but we're looking at antidepressant, anti-anxiety, PTSD, and mood stabilizing medications, anti-seizure medications, given her seizure history. And then as far as therapies, psychotherapy, we're looking at cognitive processing, EMDR, cognitive behavioral type therapies that hit depression and PTSD. So those would be really important that she's never had. In a case like this, it is a necessity.
And you also mentioned that Tammy has a mild neurocognitive disorder. Can you explain to the board what that is and what impacts it can have on an individual?
So, like I said, she's gifted, she is smart, she's intelligent. By history, also with her testing, but there are some, I think, executive functioning deficits that were deficient that I believe were due to some of these blows to the head, vicious seizures that were impaired more than they should have been. But she still has intact everyday living skills, adaptive functioning skills.
And can treatment of her mental health issues have a positive effect on her ability to stay sober?
Yes,
And similarly, can proper treatment of her substance abuse issues have a positive effect on her ability to maintain her mental health?
yes.
I don't have any other questions.
Well, then she should have known better. How about that?
Yeah, and again, what he's there to do is to say this is so much not her fault because she has all of these problems. So please be lenient with her so she can get out, get in treatment, and then everything will be fine.
No.
But the last question was, yeah, well, she could get treated. She has been treated. He also said that. But she self-medicates.
Well, how about this? She goes to prison for the rest of her life and gets treatment while she's in there. I mean,
Well, at least for 27 years. That's the rule. Holly, this is in Florida. But the doctor is it's not nice to say, but he seems kind of like an expert for hire. He's been in, I believe, Ohio and Texas is where he did his he has his practice, and then he travels around and get paid $3.50 an hour to testify.
mm,
Yeah, she's ready for Christmas. She has a Christmas plate on today. Good morning, Cindy Lou Woohoot. I hope all of you also had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I had just as many people watching me doing all of Thanksgiving as I have now. So that was I'm happy I did that so people had a place to hang out. Sometimes we should be good to other people's.
Hi, Cindy. Good to see you.
Yeah, proceed, Ryan. Okay, I'm asking at the ground, just move the microphone a little bit.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Fabian. Now, just so that I am clear, based upon your testimony, you said the police reports in this case, correct?
Yes.
Skylar, there's no one winning today because she pled no contest to the charges against her. So this is purely a sentencing hearing, which means she didn't plead guilty, but she didn't put up a defense in what's a deadly DUI case. So today it's all about how long she will spend in prison. The defense is asking for 10.5 years, and the state maximum could go up to 27 years. We have heard the defense ask their first witness about her mental state, her disease, and now it's the state that will question him about his findings, because all of the findings he have looked into is more or less self-reported. So we don't know if she has traumatic brain injuries because we don't have an MRI. So it's really hard to see, but no, she won't be winning anything. Winning for her will be getting around 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
And she have a lot of priors for DUI. That'll probably pull it up a bit.
The Volusia County Branch Jail records,
Yes.
the Garnet medical records, correct?
Yes.
Specifically for the purpose of referencing one report
say that,
seizure in
Holly.
2014, is that correct?
To answer your question in treatment.
And was there not also a report of one seizure in 2014?
Yes.
For which she was
diagnosed with a possible seizure disorder, and she was released with a prescription for Keppra, correct?
Same day, yes.
Yeah, right. And Keppra is an anti-seizure medication, correct?
Yes.
Now, in those records, there's no evidence of them ever conducting an EEG, is there?
I did not see that. No.
Okay. And so this is a self-reported incident of one seizure, correct?
Yeah, in fact, the 10 seizures, I think, were self-reported with the history of medication for the same.
And to your knowledge, Dr., and in the records that you've reviewed, you've never actually seen or reviewed any records that document an EEG or an actual finding of the occurrence of electrical episodes or seizures on an EEG, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And it could be related to alcohol.
And as opposed to voluntary alcohol consumption, correct?
There's a science to the neurobiology of alcoholism, but in part, I would not disagree with you.
And seizures can be caused by a variety of factors, correct?
Yes.
Several seizures. Right. They can be isolated incidents, correct?
Yes.
And other than her reporting to the emergency department in 2014, there's no other clinical evidence or documented evidence of her actually having any other seizures, correct?
I would agree with that.
Did you order an EEG to be done for this defendant to be examined?
I did not.
And you said that she takes meds for anxiety, correct? Medications for anxiety?
Yes.
PTSD?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And then she suffers from hypertension, you said?
Yes.
And then she suffers from nightmares, correct? What you refer to as the intrusive symptom from PTSD, correct?
Yes.
Again, these are self-reported, is that correct?
Yes.
And then of course some of these,
Well, I think clearly their argument are that she needs help, and she does, but also this is a snapshot, and I think the state will try to bring in how much help she had earlier.
They better, because I'm sure she's been offered treatment or been in treatment.
Yeah.
And what did you do with it, ma'am? Nothing.
And again, you can get all the treatment you want. If you don't work on it every day, you will relapse.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, self-reported. Everything is self-reported. Lefty is self-reported 5.5 inches.
Oh my God.
the other information that you obtained was from her family members, her sister you referenced, correct?
Yes.
Lori Cotton?
Yes.
And also from Missy. And you reported that her mother and father were alcoholics?
Yes.
And a brother who had a problem with alcoholism?
Yes.
Well, you wouldn't go so far as to say that alcoholism is hereditary, would you, doctor?
I would.
You would. You would say that alcoholism is hereditary.
Yeah, DSM certainly says it, the research says it. It's about 5 times more likely to have alcoholism if your parents do, one of your parents does.
Okay. So based upon her abuse and her family history of alcoholism, that's what we're blaming on why this defendant was drinking. Is that what you're saying?
It's contributory. I wouldn't blame it's all due to her parents. Okay, it's certainly nature and nurture like most conditions we have.
And you said that in part the reasons for her conditions you described is because her father died, correct?
Well, these are traumatic events relevant to her PTSD.
Okay. So let's actually dial that in if we can.
Sure.
The traumatic events, you would agree with me that under the DSM, there has to be a traumatic event that would be the sort of the trigger, if you will, for PTSD, correct?
Correct.
And so those events specifically would be that her father died is one of them?
Yes, I think she focused a lot on Chris's death.
And that her niece also died in a car crash, you mentioned, correct? That was traumatic for her?
Yes.
Did she report to you that she was close to her niece?
Yeah, so did Lori, the mother of that niece that died.
Did she report to you the details of this car crash that was traumatic for this defendant?
So
Just vague details.
she had someone die in a car crash?
Her niece. And I'm gonna be very interested in this because did she report the circumstance? And he was vaguely. If this niece died in DUI, that'll be kind of a.
Well, yeah, it's like
So she should know better.
know better. A lot of this is you should know better.
Yeah, especially if you lost a loved one to a DUI.
Exactly.
I don't recall specifically what they would do.
And then also you mentioned the destruction or the
disintegration of her interpersonal relationships created trauma for her. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, other than speaking to her sister,
What does
did
that
you speak to any of these individuals that she had
Where are these
relationships with?
pictures? I want to see them.
Relationships with?
I did not speak to them.
And you said that she also reported that she had, or you saw it in a medical records, perhaps you could clarify for me, that she suffered from some sort of degenerative disease of her L3 or an L5?
Yes.
Now, was that self-reported, or you actually saw that somewhere in a particular medical record?
I have two herniated disc in L4 and L5. So I'm just like Sonny. I can drink and drive.
Self-reported. It was also, in the jail records. But, most of any mental or physical condition is self-reported.
So there hasn't been any sort of imaging done to confirm any sort of degenerative disease for L3 or L5, correct?
I'm not aware of that.
And you also referenced concussions, correct?
Yes,
In fact, you stated that she did not have medical insurance, correct?
that's my understanding.
And again, that was self-reported by this defendant, correct, by Ms. Sytch?
That is correct.
So she reported to you that she'd suffered concussions previously.
But the other two informants did as well.
Okay. And the other two informants that told you she had concussions, were they medical doctors? And did you review any particular imaging, particularly an MRI of her head or CT of her head that would?
My best friend growing up had a dad who was what we call a quarterly drunk. He could stay clean for a couple of months and then he just fell off. And it was so sad. And that kept my friend away from. He almost never drank because he was afraid that he had that gene.
Document the occurrence of any concussion?
No, I didn't have any historical imaging data.
Did you direct, in the course of your evaluation of her, ask to have this defendant evaluated by having an MRI of her head?
We did not do that.
Did you have a CT done of her head looking for any evidence of previous concussions or any other type of brain injury?
No.
Has any type of imaging or scanning from any other medical facility been provided to you to review reports documenting any type of traumatic
Nope.
brain injury or other injury to her brain?
Halifax, I think the day following the accident here, CT scan indicated no acute findings
No acute findings.
from that injury or that incident.
Well, you didn't have them report anything as it relates to an actual traumatic brain injury, did you?
Well, I have concerns that she had a Glasgow coma score, I think, between 3 and 9, which is a concern.
After having a crash? Okay. So there's nothing about the reports that you reviewed that you could determine injury prior to the accident or post-accident, correct?
Hey, Stephanie, thank you for turning in and drive safely. And Wicked Psych, welcome, welcome.
Hey,
It's so no injuries on the scan,
okay.
but he still believes there might be some.
Yeah.
Post-accident, there's discussion, again, the Glasgow coma scale, at some point she immediately was unresponsive. So other than that, I don't have records documenting any traumatic brain injury or concussion before this accident.
So before this crash, there's no MRI imaging or CT imaging that you know of that documents any injury to this defendant's brain, correct?
Correct. She had told me that she had CT scans throughout her adulthood, but we didn't have records now, to my understanding.
So she did have insurance and she did have CT scans.
Well, I don't know if she had insurance, but I believe she said at one point she had scans done of different areas of her body.
But you didn't have any of those records and you haven't reviewed any of those records, correct?
That's correct.
So they play no part in you offering your opinion today, is that correct?
No, I can't testify to records I don't have.
And records that were never provided to you.
No, I don't have.
Now, don't you think that if such records existed, those would have been important for you making a diagnosis of traumatic brain injury?
Yeah, sure, they would be relevant to my evaluation.
So these records may or may not exist, but you didn't review them, but you're still saying that you believe that she has traumatic brain injury. Is that correct?
Well, I would say a concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury, so I would say that it's likely that she's had concussions and she would have a mild TDI. I'm not making it more.
So we're assuming that she had concussions because that's based upon her self-reporting, correct?
Most of the research in clinical or forensics that has to do with head injury is TDI, concussions, and self-report.
And I'm asking you in this case, this is based solely upon self-report.
I didn't hear that the circumstances of the niece. She went really fast after that, but still, she got PTSD from that. But still, he's really trying to imply that she has frontal lobe problems, but she has no brain injury after her multiple concussions during her resting period. No, this is the former valet in the WWF. She had the Candido brothers. I can't remember their name, and she was a valet from for LOD, Legion of Destruction or Legion of Doom. She was very famous. She was the most downloaded person back in '94 or something. Very, very, very hot lady back then. After she stopped her wrestling career, she fell into a decades-long substance abuse. She has multiple priors for DUI. And last year in March, she rear-ended a guy, 75, I think I said, 75-year-old guy who died, and another driver was injured as well. Today is just a sentencing hearing. The defense hopes she'll get 10 and a half years. She could get up to 27 years in prison. This guy is getting paid $350 an hour to testify.
Yeah. Yeah, she had a pretty sweet outfit, her wrestling outfit. Yeah, because it was Legion of Doom that she was
Yeah,
with.
yeah. When she was with Legion of Doom, she was,
Like,
but with the Candido, she just wore like a classic sports bra and pants. But she was very famous for being back when you had to wait hours to download a picture.
oh yeah.
He was very famous. That's why when I saw it, I thought of a young man in a small country thinking all American women look like that, and
Oh.
I wanted to go to the US. Well, probably both him and what was his famous promo that Brett had a sunny day as well. So yeah. I hate that PTSD is just become everything fits into a PTSD thing. I remember when they started diagnosing us veterans with it, and how hard it is to get PTSD diagnosis. And today, if you grew up in a bad relationship, you have PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if you followed wrestling back in the 90s, you would know the name Sonny.
I did, but it didn't hit me right off the bat. It sounded familiar, and then once I Googled it after you text me, I was like, oh yeah, I know her.
Yeah, I had her picture up before. We could do it again because new people has arrived. Maybe take one of her old ones so people can remember her in her prime. Should we do the LOD or should we do the
I like the
eBay one?
Because that's the outfit I liked.
This picture is one of the most downloaded. I believe it was 92 or 94. It was one of the most downloaded pictures online. And that's when he said the roid abuse because you needed roids to look the part. No, she has no roids in that body. That's just a fitness girl. You don't need roids to look like this. You just need a lot of salad and running.
No. China was roids for sure.
When they have a chin that's this wide, it's normally roids.
Mm-hmm. I feel
And she didn't have anyone.
no.
I sent one to Jamie for you. I want what did I miss?
Oh, she had. Let me look. I think it's what I saw. Oh, it was just the before and after. Like
Yeah, it's on the thumbnail as well.
Yeah.
Nothing better than the mid to late 90s wrestling, and then it turned a little too rowdy maybe when the cat lost her boobage covering online, and Lefty. Do you remember the segment with the Edge and Lita? That was great.
We know because me, Valhalla, and Baker are having a big discussion about wrestling. And then I went to YouTube and was watching all the old school stuff. And I was like, it just brought back so many good memories.
Yeah.
I loved it. I was in the Attitude Era was what I really liked. I know you guys were a little before that, but that's what I liked.
Yeah, that's why you always have to balance out the crazy versus hot scale. The hotter they get, the less crazy you should accept. So yeah, but she was a very, very, very beautiful lady back then, but also a very, very troubled lady with a lot of drugs in her system, but none of those were roids.
Is that correct? Yes or no, doctor?
Yes.
And there's no medical evidence that documents that she had a traumatic brain injury, correct?
The Garnett Hospital records indicate she went there for a seizure. I think she reported a history of concussions and depression, so.
Again,
It's
I'll ask you the
self-reported.
same question.
It's self-reported. I'm not arguing.
Yes, self-reporting.
Yes.
So trust her. She was sick is how we're supposed to do it.
Now, you first met this defendant in May of 2023, this year, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And I believe you said you evaluated her on May 30th of 2023, May 31st of 2023, and then saw her more recently via Zoom on 10/21 of 2023, is that correct?
Correct.
And you were hired, to be fair, for the purposes of sentencing mitigation, is that correct?
Correct.
And
Fofa, if you didn't watch wrestling, yeah, it's but believe me, she was every young girl, not young girls, every young boy's dream back then.
And that's what you do within your practice. You review cases and evaluate people for purposes of sentence mitigation or downward departures, instances such as this. Is that fair to say?
That's part of it.
And that was what you were hired to do in this
See you later,
correct?
Lefty.
Yes, correct.
So prior to May 30th, 2023, you had never seen this defendant before, is that correct?
Correct.
And so you had no knowledge, personal knowledge of her mental health history prior to May 30th of 2023.
We haven't heard why she had seizures.
And you
We've
weren't her
heard she
treating
had
physician,
them.
correct?
Mm.
Now, when you first saw her in May 30th of 2023, is that why she was in the Volusia County Branch Jail in custody?
Yes,
And she had been there for approximately a year at that point in time, correct?
that is correct.
And facing a potential number of years in prison, would you agree with me, doctor, that that would be a source of possible depression?
Certainly.
And sitting in custody while having your sort of movements restricted and your activities restricted, that would be a source of depression?
Yes.
And despite some of her failed relationships that you have described, this defendant previously enjoyed somewhat of a celebrity lifestyle, is that fair to say?
Fair.
So she's sitting in jail for approximately a year when you come see her, correct?
Yes.
She now no longer has that sort of public appreciation or public admiration at that point in time, correct?
Correct.
She's gained weight, correct?
Correct.
She's facing a significant amount of time in prison?
Correct.
So her physical appearance has deteriorated somewhat from her former days of being a WWE wrestler.
I don't know if that has no problem.
And at this point, she's, as I said, sort of lost the admiration of her fans that she previously enjoyed.
I agree.
Those are all things that could cause depression, couldn't they, doctor?
Yes.
In fact, wouldn't it be fair to say that depression is probably a common symptom of inmates who are facing prison sentences?
It's common.
Not exactly an uplifting time in someone's life, correct?
Correct.
Now, you referenced also that they believe she suffers from borderline personality disorder, correct?
Correct.
And part of the hallmarks that you look for in assessing that disorder are the instability of interpersonal relationships. Right? And you described situations where the defendant has several failed relationships, correct?
Correct.
And that she's gone through the cycle of feeling loved and then feeling abandoned and sort of fights these constant feelings of abandonment and then seeks out love again, correct?
Correct.
Now, many of these relationships occurred in her early 20s, correct?
I would say at least one of them or two of them.
Isn't that somewhat a normal progression of women trying to find their way in their relationships in their early 20s?
This is extreme.
Okay. And now this is extreme as she's reported it to you in May of 2023, correct?
Yeah.
And this is as she's reported it to
Harassment.
you after she's been in jail for a year.
Harassment.
Yeah, but I don't sense that she was not being candid, and the collaterals I interviewed were very consistent with these emotional relationships by history.
She was also candid with you about her use of alcohol, correct? You'd agree with me, doctor, wouldn't you, that the excessive use of alcohol can also destroy relationships, can't it?
Yes.
And when you did her neuropsychological testing, for the most part, she tested above average, correct?
Average above average. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing all that remarkable.
The executive functioning was the issue, but most of her testing was okay.
And that she was only impaired in the sort of immediate recall area, correct? Isn't that what you testified to?
Yes.
That her long delayed recall was actually quite good.
Correct.
I think she's doing a pretty good
And you
job of
also referenced her
showing that he just believes her.
reporting of pain. You didn't think that that was particularly a catastrophe or out of or untruthfully reporting, correct?
No, I think she has a lot of somatic health complaints in addition to emotional ones. So, but I don't think she was exaggerating her pain, physical pain.
And so someone who had been sort of in the world of like wrestling might be quite normal for them to experience some sort of pain, correct?
This would be given if they're in business long.
Well, someone who also is in middle age, would that also be a common cause for various ailments and pain?
Unfortunately.
And the defendant is 50 years old now, correct?
Yeah, it's the state's cross now.
51, or she will be.
So you said that she did a lot of self-reporting in terms of her complaints, correct?
Yes.
So she's aware. She was aware prior to the crash in this case.
Well, it's the state's job to dismantle his defense that it's so sad for her. She needs a lesser sentence. So
No.
she's just running through all the points that the defense put up that it was so sad for her.
Not really sad.
No,
She had
don't
PTSD.
drink and drive.
Yeah.
Well, she endorsed these symptoms during the evaluation, but I don't know how much I don't think she had a lot of insight into the extent of the psychological problems and psychiatric diagnoses she does have.
So she complained to you about certain problems that she was feeling and that she had. Would that be more accurate to say?
I asked her questions about psychiatric symptoms and she would endorse them or not.
And she chose to solve those problems by the use of alcohol. Would you agree with that statement, doctor?
Some of them certainly, mostly the relationship dysfunction issues.
And well, she certainly abused alcohol on the date of the crash in this case.
I
Is
can
that
see
correct?
that.
Yes,
And you diagnosed her with alcohol use disorder, isn't that correct?
correct.
And certainly the use of
Name is
alcohol, to the extent that she actually has any of these other mental disorders that you referenced, alcohol would exacerbate or worsen the symptomology of these disorders, would it not?
Certainly can.
So essentially, at the time that you evaluate her, she's been in custody for a year, correct?
Yes,
Her life as she known it has been sort of taken from her, correct?
correct.
She no longer has a fan base, and she no longer has the ability to enjoy the celebrity that she once enjoyed.
In much part.
She's gained weight, correct?
Correct.
She's depressed.
Agreed.
In fact, you said in your report that she ignores physiological symptoms of depression, such as lethargy, poor motivation, difficulties with sleep and concentration. Is that correct?
Yes,
Did you ever have her physically evaluated? I'm not talking about her head. We already discussed the MRI or a head CT. But did you ever have her physically assessed by a doctor?
no, I reviewed the Lucia County jail records that presented her medical conditions.
And so she's a 58-year-old woman who's had some weight gain, correct?
Yes,
Depressed,
yes,
reports lethargy,
yes,
poor motivation.
correct.
Sounds like most of the female population in the mid-50s suffering from menopause and perimenopause symptoms of the doctor.
I'd agree in part.
I have a question before you leave, Brett.
I like that ending. So she's not just like every other 50-year-old lady in America.
I mean, everybody be honest, a lot of us, when we don't feel as great and we gain some weight, you're just naturally, you're not happy about it. But it doesn't mean go get in your car, go drink and drive, and we're supposed to feel bad for you.
Exactly. And I like that she went young, sweet, not young, hard, sweet, and to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Did you check this? Did you check that? Isn't just common for ladies to feel like that. Boom.
What age did the defendant's alcohol use manifest, you know?
Started at 23. She informed me that she started drinking casually after work. And by 28, it got so chronic, she started having pancreatitis as a result.
Just for council's knowledge, the report is not.
We have an abbreviated report basically just explaining the testing results. The form of that I didn't have to now, Dr. Vivian, Keppra is an anticonvulsant.
Yes.
And doctors prescribe Keppra for seizures, is that right?
Yes.
And not only was Ms. Sytch taking the anticonvulsant back in 2014, I could learn at medical, is she also being prescribed Keppra out of jail right now?
Yes.
And the state asked you a number of questions about CT imaging. Does CT imaging even show concussions?
No, it's basically an X-ray of your head and brain, and it really looks at hemorrhage, blood in your brain.
Exactly.
And the CT
And
that the state talked about.
We all go
this
through
weekend,
phases of our
how
life
that
where we don't
has a
feel
real acute
good
finding.
about ourselves and feel
Doctor
depressed.
Craig?
Yes, the acute finding.
You can
would be that
self-medicate, but
alcohol
it just don't give you the right to kill other
responsible.
people by driving.
That's rare to see.
Yeah.
And at an emergency room, they're looking for acute findings that they can treat right away and stabilize someone.
Yeah, it's really hemorrhaging in the brain.
They're not looking for whether someone has ever had a seizure in their entire life.
Not in particular.
And so the state also talked about her having spinal changes, and there being no imaging from that. But the Volusia County jail records that you reviewed, she was actually given imaging of her spine. Do you recall that?
I believe what you're saying. I don't recall findings. I know they said that she had a back condition or lower back being unspecified.
if I showed you a copy of that record, would that help refresh your recollection?
Sure.
And for the state, I'm referring to page 52 of the Volusia County Branch Jail records. I may approach your honor. Now, having had an opportunity to review that pathologist's report, was there imaging done of Ms. Sytch at the jail on her spine?
Yes, the finding of spinal stenosis.
Those are issues with her back.
But again,
And
how
the
many
state
people
had
in their
talked about
50s have
Ms. Sytch,
spinal stenosis?
first being depressed in the Volusia County Branch Jail, but actually the Garnett Health Records talks about a diagnosis of depression back in 2014, right?
Correct.
And she was actually on medication for depression back in 2014.
Blues Prozac.
So this is not a new revelation that all of a sudden she's in jail and she's depressed because of jail. This is a long history.
From that record and, yeah, self-report, which we rely on, and forensic examinations, we have to. And the collateral information reports, she's had evidence of chronic depression for years.
And the state mentioned Ms. Sytch's relationships, being in a number of these relationships in her 20s. She was actually with Chris Candido until her early 30s, right?
Yeah, but she cheated on Chris Candido with multiple men.
So it'd be fair to say that the majority of these relationships were in her 30s or beyond.
That is correct.
It's a Christmas suit.
And the state had indicated on their questioning of you that her test results were not remarkable. But in fact, there was something remarkable about the neuropsychological testing results. Is that right?
Yeah, just the executive functioning is a concern of mine, given her, level of intellect and that impairment. So I do have concerns about a frontal executive functioning or
Maybe he and Shawn Michael
And
will
it's
tag team
actually
for the
even
last
more
time.
pronounced that she is doing
Maybe
so
even the
well in
first
all
time.
other areas and has such a huge deficit in this executive functioning.
Yes.
Now, as a psychologist, as a neuropsychologist, would it be fair to say that most of the information that you get is from self-report?
Yeah, whether it's a med school setting or in a jail.
My car doesn't have the slot where you put in your driver's license. So it runs fine without a license.
I mean, yeah, like maybe she didn't have one.
Yeah.
People, I mean, obviously I have people in my life that have been through this and they still drove without it because they were
Yeah.
dumb.
It's I know you can get that alcohol boot on your car, but still, there are ways around that as well.
I would be curious to hear about more of that stuff because clearly, if you get a boot put on your car, I mean, to get around that, you have to find somebody to do it for you. And a lot of them, I think, do they take snapshots now and stuff so that you can't do all that thing?
We don't use them in Denmark, so I don't know.
Anyways, yeah.
But still, yeah.
So there's a lot of things that they can do to get around it. So that's why it's less and less sympathy for this person at all. Like not at all. No sympathy.
Interlock. You had friends blow into the and
Yeah.
that's another thing. I hate that mentality with, oh, can you please blow for me because I just had. It could be your kid.
Yeah, that's what I thought because I thought they changed it now where they take like a snapshot because a lot of people, I mean, obviously that was a big problem back in the day.
Yeah, and again, it could be your kid.
Yeah.
It could be your mom. It could be your grandpa riding
And if
in the
you
other car.
can't pass your little blowy thing in your car to drive, what the heck are you doing? What is wrong with you? So, anyways.
Yeah, and I just hate it, and I can't say I probably drove above the limit when I was younger because I was stupid and reckless, but I always if I felt like I was too drunk to drive, and that's the problem. When do you feel too drunk to drive? But especially after I had kids, I got very, very conscious about speed, about alcohol, because it could be my kid in the other car.
Well, that's the thing is like some people when you're younger, you make a really dumb decision, and usually it only takes one time for you to make a
Yeah.
dumb decision and go, oh, well, nope. I mean,
Yeah, that's 25 in prison. Bye.
yeah, like anybody ever wake up and not realize how they got home and scared the living crap out of you and you never did that again? A lot of people do that.
Yeah.
And that's usually how it works. But people that continually straddle that line all the time, and they're like, yeah, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, then they don't deserve sympathy whatsoever.
No. And I can cry. You can cry me a river the first time. Your second DUI, you're just an idiot.
Yep.
That's the same with my brother is always complaining about getting speeding tickets, but they have a system, and I don't know if you have this in the US. On the side of the road, there's a sign with some numbers on it, and in your car, there's like a little red arm going up. If that little red arm stays on the same number on as the side of the road, you won't get a speeding ticket. I cracked the code. I know I'm intelligent, but still, I have had one, and that's because I was angry and was going way too fast. I paid that, no problem. But my brother keeps getting them and say, "Well, the road where you could drive faster there." Yeah, you could. And if I wasn't fat and I had feathers, I could fly, but I can't.
I was listening to your story like it was something super serious, and I was like, oh, I know he's being.
I hate the American speed limit. 55 miles per hour. I can run that fast off a cliff.
No, I would never. If I had to call Baker for anything after making a decision like that, he'd leave me to rot, and
Yeah.
I would expect that because come on.
My dad told me when I became a rowdy teenager, if I ever pick you up at the police station, I will make sure you'll regret it and you will remember that day for the rest of your life. I've never been arrested. I once fell asleep on the lawn in front of the police station and was asked if I wanted to come in and sleep with them. But I was so afraid of my dad, and he never touched me one day in my life. But I could feel that day, if I ever did it, he would beat the ever loving something out of me. So when I was so drunk, I slept on their front lawn. I knew, nope, you're not coming out of the police station tomorrow. So I walked home.
I agree. My dad was the same way. Like he never laid a finger on any of us, but he had that demeanor where it was like, you do not mess up. You make that decision. And like, so we knew better.
Yeah. It says 55, so you go 65. Yo, the American I drove with, he went way below, above 70. And I thought, well, can you do that? Well, my dad was an EMT, and all EMTs know the police. So, and we don't have bail system. We just get let out when we get sober.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but my dad was a good guy. So he never did anything wrong to me or my siblings or my mom. So seeing him and feeling that side of him,
I think
I
it's
knew.
more of a disappointment, right? Like that's how I felt. Because like seeing my parents disappointed got to me worse than anything. You know?
Yeah, that's but again, just I think he told me when I was 13, after my first time out drinking. And till this day, I'm still thinking, nope, I'm not doing it. And he's been dead for almost 5 years.
Mhm.
So it's stuck with me. And it's a good thing that it stuck with me. I told my kids, no matter how, where, or what time of day it is, where you are, you're never getting into a car where you are drunk and driving, or the person who's driving is drunk. I'll pick you up. You'll have to wait a little while, but I'll pick you up or I'll transfer the money for the taxi.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, it's better that they're afraid of you, so they don't do the bad stuff.
And in a clinical setting, if you have a patient come in and they talk to you and they tell you, look, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm having nightmares, you don't get on the phone immediately and ask their family and friends if that's true.
No, I
And when Ms. Sytch talked to you, she did not try to minimize any of her drinking.
No.
She did not try to minimize any of her relationship issues.
No.
And the information that you received from her family and friends, it was in line with the information that Ms. Sytch gave you.
it was.
I don't have any further questions.
Read it. Or read wrong.
No, right. No, you're fine.
All right, just witness 16.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection from the state then? No, Your Honor. All right, thank you. All right, perhaps people would like to go on until 11:30, you take an early lunch at 11:30. Everybody okay to go? All right.
Judge, we call Dr. Jeffrey Danziger.
Please ready, please. Just tell me. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I
See you next week. Okay, step up on the stage.
Would you please introduce yourself to the court?
I am Jeffrey Danziger, D-A-N-Z-I-G-E-R.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a psychiatrist.
Where did you go to school?
After graduating high school in South Florida, I attended Harvard College, graduating with a bachelor's degree in biology in 1978. I then went to the University of Miami School of Medicine, where I received my MD degree in 1982
Oh, just
in
forget that.
psychiatry,
Good God.
forensic populations, and I never made it to a court appearance. Given that, I'd probably testified over this. So an example would be if you have liver cirrhosis from drinking, you continue to drink.
All right. Now, you testified earlier that you're board certified in addiction medicine. Can you tell, I want to talk specifically
Something to consider in the differential. And it's very common for heavy drinkers. They lose access, alcohol withdrawal seizures can occur. In addition to the physical sort of pharmacologic symptoms of alcohol, she noted the loss of control.
Oh, yeah, good now. Sorry, I'll go
Or a
back to the
genetic
start.
component that heightens the risk. We know that adverse experiences of physical illness, such as seizures, issues of treatment, and its penalty cases.
All
Well, he's the guy who's going to talk about
Are you
her.
able to give me a rough breakdown, maybe
her
by
addiction.
percentage of how often you testify? when
I'll
you're
just,
called upon
go
by the
blow my
defense
nose.
Versus the prosecution.
It's hard to do because many of the cases that I see, I'm appointed by the judge, so I'm not neither the prosecution nor the defense. They may agree that I'm okay to evaluate someone, but my opinion falls where it may. It may be favorable to the defense, it may be favorable to the prosecution. Of course, many of those cases resolve with stipulations, and I never make it to a court appearance. Given that, I've probably testified over the years more times for the defense, but certainly I'm no stranger to being retained by the prosecution or the state.
All right. What was your, what hourly rate did you charge in this case?
300 per hour.
And are you able to estimate how many hours you've had in this case?
Well, they depend how long you keep me here today, but somewhere in the range of 10 to 12.
All right. At this time, we would offer Dr. Danziger as a witness competent to offer opinion testimony in the area of psychiatry.
Any objection, state? No objection. All right, go ahead now.
What were you asked to do in this case, doctor?
I was asked to evaluate Tamara Sytch and essentially to offer opinions as to the presence of any psychiatric or substance use disorders and whether there were any factors potentially relevant towards her sentencing from the psychiatric standpoint, anything that the judge might find valuable to consider in determining her sentence.
And when were you retained?
I was officially retained on August 9, 2023.
Did you rely on records and reports of others concerning Tammy's past history in order to formulate your opinion?
Mostly I had of course, the charging affidavit and information from Halifax Hospital on March 25, 2022, the day of the event causing us to be here today. Other than that, I did not have access to other records. Of course, I heard today what Dr. Fabian had access to.
Do you recall if you also reviewed the Volusia County Jail medical records?
I did not, I was not supplied.
Okay. Did you personally meet with Tammy?
I did.
Do you recall when that was?
Sure, it was August 11, 2023, and it was at the Volusia main jail.
All right. Now, you testified earlier that you're board certified in addiction medicine. Can you tell, I want to talk specifically about that. What is addiction medicine?
Actually, it's addiction psychiatry, to be precise. And essentially, the subject of addictions involves the use and abuse of substances. It could be tobacco, alcohol, street drugs, prescription drugs, their pharmacology and physiology, their effects, issues of dependence and addiction, issues of treatment, and its interaction with both medical and other psychiatric disorders.
And from a psychiatrist standpoint, what is addiction?
We can think of addiction as a cluster of cognitive, behavioral, and physiologic symptoms indicating that a person continues to use substances despite significant problems and consequences. And we can think of addiction as having several components. The first would be impaired control, which could be manifested by using a substance in greater amounts than intended, craving a substance, failed efforts to quit or cut down, and using the substance so that it occupies a great deal of time, either trying to obtain the substance, be intoxicated on it, or find it. The second component of addiction, or a substance use disorder to be precise, would be social impairment. So someone who is not meeting their obligations at school, work, or in the home, taking care of themselves or children, social problems such as losing jobs, the end of relationships, less participation in activities because you're intoxicated or recovering from the effects. A third component of addiction would be that of risky use, which would be using drugs in an unsafe manner that puts you at risk. So examples would be, you've already had to be revived with Narcan, nearly dying from the use of opioids, but you continue to use. So using it in dangerous situations, or using in the face of medical or psychiatric problems worsened by the illness. So an example would be if you have liver cirrhosis from drinking, you continue to drink. And finally, the fourth aspect would be the pharmacologic effects, which would involve tolerance, meaning you need ever greater amounts of the substance to produce the same effect, and then withdrawal symptoms, meaning when you don't have access to the drugs and your blood level drops, then you have symptoms of physical illness, such as seizures, which we've talked about earlier with Dr. Fabian, which are related to that substance. So essentially, addiction is a constellation of behaviors that cause significant problems, yet someone continues to use despite all of these different manifestations.
Is addiction a choice?
Usually not. While the use of substances may be considered voluntary, usually when it develops to the point of addiction, it is a compulsion. There are changes in brain circuitry that continue to fuel the addiction process. So it is, while there's certainly a voluntary nature, whether you take a drink or inject a drug or smoke a drug, well, there's a voluntary component to it. There is a compulsive aspect to it that can overwhelm an individual's control. And indeed, one of the four core characteristics of addiction is the notion of impaired control.
And generally, what can addiction be a result of?
Well, it's usually multifactorial. I think it was stated during Dr. Fabian's testimony that there's a genetic component. Now, genes are not destiny, but the more relatives you have with substance use disorders, the greater your risk of developing it. So there is a hereditable or a genetic component that heightens the risk. We know that adverse experiences, particularly adverse childhood experiences, also heighten the risk not only of substance use, but of future mental illness, school dysfunction, occupational problems, and criminality. Certainly one's environment. If you grow up somewhere where for religious reasons or for cultural reasons, there's no access to drugs, your risk is less than if you grow up in an environment where drugs are plentiful. If you're around people who use drugs, certainly many of the psychiatric illnesses people suffer from, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, there's often what we call comorbidity, meaning having one heightens your risk of the other. Some of it may be due to self-medication. People whose mental illnesses are not properly treated, they resort to the use of alcohol or other drugs in an effort to provide temporary relief, even though eventually it leads to even worsening problems. You get what we call a positive feedback cycle. You're more depressed, so you drink to go to sleep and get relief. The more you drink, the more depressed you feel, so you resort more to alcohol. You get this positive feedback. So these are various risk factors. The more risk factors you have, the greater your risk of developing it. But again, some people, despite adverse circumstances, are able to avoid substance use, whereas others simply develop severe substance use problems, which then can impact not only on their psychiatric illness, but worsen their physical health as well, lead to a shortened lifespan, as well as all of the other manifestations, busted relationships, loss of jobs, loss of marriages, early death, incarceration, legal problems, can be devastating effects.
Are there physical symptoms associated with addiction?
Well, certainly, yes. Depends upon the substance. Certainly with alcohol, people can have all sorts of gastrointestinal problems, gastrointestinal bleeding, problems with the pancreas. Certainly it can impact the brain functioning. It can cause what we call alcoholic neuropathy. It damages the nerves, leading to painful conditions. Certainly liver problems, strokes, heart disease. If you already had issues such as hypertension or diabetes, alcohol makes it dramatically worse. Again, often leads to a very shortened lifespan. So alcohol can certainly lead to physical problems. We're all familiar with people who are using fentanyl or heroin who are dying because of overdoses. Certainly individuals who use methamphetamine can have serious problems and shortened lifespan. So yes, the use of substances, depending upon the substance, can result in significant physical problems, culminating essentially in early death.
Now, you spent time with Tammy. In your opinion, as a psychiatrist, does Tammy have an addiction to alcohol?
Oh yes, absolutely.
And what did you base that opinion on?
Well, essentially her history, which is she reports both tolerance to alcohol, that at her peak drinking an average of 7 to 9 drinks per day, someone who is naive to alcohol use. Someone here doesn't drink and they had 9 drinks in a day, they might end up in a hospital. There's no way they have the tolerance to do that. So she reported tolerance to alcohol. She reported alcohol withdrawal symptoms, waking up in the morning shaky with chills and vomiting. Again, the seizure issue was brought up before, and certainly for some people, if they don't have access to alcohol, they may have an alcohol withdrawal seizure. I'm not a neurologist, I haven't done an EEG on her, but the seizures may well have been alcohol related. That's certainly something to consider in the differential. And it's very common for heavy drinkers. They lose access, alcohol withdrawal seizures can occur. In addition to the physical sort of pharmacologic symptoms of alcohol, she noted the loss of control, failed efforts to quit or cut down, failed efforts at inpatient and residential rehabilitation, often drinking more than intended, drinking despite pancreatitis. The pancreas is an organ in our abdomen involved in digestion. But she reported developing pancreatitis, which is an extremely painful condition where the pancreas is inflamed, as well as a pseudocyst, which is a condition within the pancreas, continuing to drink despite these medical complications. Frequent relapses, failed efforts to quit, and of course, multiple arrests, various DUIs, despite all of these complications, continuing to drink, leading to the
Sean.
present unfortunate and sad set of circumstances today.
Now, earlier you mentioned there's a genetic component to addiction. How is that relevant to Tammy?
My understanding, and again, I've not spoken with relatives, but my understanding is Tammy reported and Dr. Fabian testified that there is a family history of alcoholism. Again, I'll reiterate, it's not determinative. Just because you have an alcoholic relative doesn't mean you're going to get it. It's a risk factor. Just like with diabetes. The more relatives you have with diabetes, the greater your risk. Some of it may be genetic. Some of it may be growing up in a home with alcohol, with someone who's an alcoholic may increase your risk. It's an adverse childhood experience. So it may be both a bit of genetics and environment. Again, it's not 100% determinative. The more relatives you have with alcohol use disorders, it puts you at greater risk to develop.
I'm not pulling that one up, Sean, but
Did you conduct any
I haven't.
on Tammy with regard to addiction?
I did a test called the
Oh my-
AUDIT, the Alcohol Use Disorder Identification Test, and it's a screening tool. It's not meant to be exhaustive. It's a 10-item screening tool developed in conjunction with the World Health Organization that's designed to identify problematic alcohol use and alcohol-related consequences. So I use it frequently both in clinical and forensic practice, and it's often helpful in assessing whether someone needs further assessment and further treatment. It's a 10-item tool. Scores range from 0 to 40. Typically, scores of 8 or more are associated with
Well,
hazardous alcohol.
the judge's name is Karen.
Scores of 16 or more are generally correlated with an alcohol use disorder. Ms. Sytch scored a 31, which is an extremely high score.
Sure.
It's based on drinking within the past year. Now, she's been incarcerated for more than a year, so I modified it to say the year prior to March 2022. What was her drinking like? Obviously, she's been incarcerated for quite some time without access to alcohol and an enforced state of sobriety. But based on what she related to me, and again, it's self-reported, but a score of 31 is certainly consistent with a very serious alcohol use disorder. I would call it severe by the DSM standard and consistent with very hazardous drinking behavior and severe consequences.
And you mentioned that that's a self-reported test, and that she scored on the high severity scale. What's significant about it being self-reporting and that high result?
Well, she's certainly not minimizing. One of the things we see in addiction disorders is people often are in denial. I don't have a problem. I'm just a social drinker.
We brought up her pictures earlier. Yes, she was a very beautiful lady when she was in her prime. Then she isn't in her prime anymore. And the pictures, the shots we had of her in court, you can watch in the beginning of the stream. She packed on a few.
Parents drink the same way. It's not a problem. And certainly she is, as I met with her, she demonstrated insight that I'm not minimizing or denying my alcohol use, and it's been very problematic and caused great distress.
And you mentioned that she told you that she had opportunities for addiction treatment previously. Is it unusual for individuals with addiction to relapse, and why is that?
Well, people with substance use disorders frequently relapse. Some benefit from treatment more than others, but one of the questions we have to ask ourselves as doctors is someone isn't getting better, why? Why isn't treatment working? Is there something that's being missed? So some people, even with the best of treatment, will still relapse. But if someone has been through multiple treatment, both psychiatric
And again,
psychiatric,
everything is
they're not
self-reported.
getting better. It behooves us.
So
as
how
doctors
reliable
to think,
is it?
Are we treating the wrong thing? Are we missing something? I believe.
Is a degenerate gambler,
All
do
right,
you believe him?
and we're going to get to that.
Again, to me, that's when I feel like it's an expert
In
for
this
hire.
circumstance, where we are today, there's something different about this circumstance.
Even
than previously.
what's her name? The old lady.
Um,
She went and talked to them in prison.
What we know about Ms. Sytch, she went through different rehab efforts. We know she's been treated with antidepressants, but she didn't get better. So the question is why? And one of the things I was taught in my training is if you have someone with depression, ask about bipolar symptoms, especially if they're not getting better. So what we know is that it often takes 10 years on average for the first time someone comes into psychiatric treatment to get the diagnosis of bipolar right. That's not something I as a psychiatrist are proud of in my profession. But one of the reasons is that people often don't come in for treatment when they're manic. They feel well, they have lots of energy, they feel great, they're excited, they don't view it as a problem. They only come in when they're depressed. So one of the things I inquire carefully about, and I used an instrument, it's a screening tool called the Mood Disorder Questionnaire, which just asks specifically about bipolar symptoms. And what Ms. Sytch reported to me was, in addition to the depressive episodes, which I haven't asked me about yet, but she described these discrete episodes where she is accelerated. that her mood is elated. She feels
Hey, Leah Step. Haven't seen you here before, and you are so right.
Absolutely.
The first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. And the second step is admitting that you have to solve that problem. And a lot of addicts have that, well, I can just do it one more time. This time I can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
thank you for participating in the chat. I really like when new people show up. I like when old people show up as well, but I'm happy to see new faces, and especially in chat. Yeah, it is a choice, especially when she has been in multiple treatments before. She's been in jail multiple times. She chose to drink that day and hit that guy. So I don't feel sorry for her at all. I feel sorry for her life that she ended up where she is. But she have had, and you can call it divine intervention or whatever you want, she have had multiple times where God tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Do you think this is the right thing to do?" And she said, "Yep, let me have another bottle."
very high. She can also switch rapidly to being irritable. Her speech is more rapid. She gets by on less sleep, and even though she's sleeping less, she has increased energy. She's more reckless, and her sex drive is up during those times.
Oh.
Now, it's interesting to me that I arrived at this diagnosis completely independent of Dr. Fabian. I had no idea when I met with Tammy Sytch what Dr. Fabian had opined. But working separately, we reached an identical diagnosis. And again, in his testimony, he said he spoke with relatively confirmed episodes of acceleration. So this makes sense to me. Why didn't she get better? She told me she's been on the antidepressants, not only in jail, but for years before that, they never really worked. Now, the distinction between bipolar disorder and major depressive disorder is not merely an academic one. The treatment is entirely different. We treat major depressive disorders, at least from a psychiatric standpoint, with antidepressants. And that's the usual treatment, not to discount psychotherapy and counseling, but from a medical standpoint, we prescribe antidepressants. Now, bipolar depression looks identical to major depression at the time. There's no clinical distinction between someone who's bipolar depressed and major depression. They look identical, but the treatment's entirely different. Antidepressants don't work in bipolar disorder. They generally don't. In fact, if you look at the treatment guidelines, they say don't prescribe antidepressants alone to bipolar patients. Why? They paradoxically make things worse. At best, they don't work, but what they can do
So it
is
was
increase cycling,
med
cause
school
people to have
that she
manic
did it.
episodes and become more irritable. So when you treat someone with bipolar disorder, they should be on a mood stabilizer. You put them on an antidepressant, best it doesn't work, at worst, it makes them actually worse. And then if they have a substance use disorder, the medicines aren't working, it puts them at greater risk of self-medicating. I believe, my opinion, is that's what happened with Tammy Sytch, that she was an undiagnosed bipolar, she was on antidepressants, they didn't work, she continued to be depressed, continued to cycle, used alcohol in large part to self-medicate, had a severe alcohol use disorder, she was likely at genetic risk for alcohol, and this is how we come to this situation, where despite treatment and rehab efforts, it didn't work. In my opinion, she was not diagnosed or treated properly over the years.
All right, so what we know from the past history is that she was diagnosed with depression and treated with Prozac. We know that.
Yes, and I believe there was a reference.
No, and one of the big problems with having mental problems and maybe an addiction is, I had a friend who self-medicated with amphetamine because it made his ADHD go away. I know Ritalin is kind of like amphetamine as well, but he was so hard strung out and he couldn't see it because it helped me. My brain works better when I do it. So it's just the doctors who don't see it. He's not here anymore because he just took all the amphetamine you could, and but it helped him. He was sure of it, and that's probably just as much the psychological part as the the drug abuse that's talking at that point. So you really, you should never cross your medication with your self-medication, especially if you have an addictive personality. It's it'll often lead to a even faster decline. She used to be attractive and ruined her life and others' lives through the decisions she made. Yeah, but now it just seems like, well, she inherited her addiction, and it was sad for her. But there was still a 75-year-old man who didn't come home that night because she chose to drink.
To another antidepressant, Celexa or citalopram in the past.
And as you just said, you disagree with that diagnosis. So the proper diagnosis, in your opinion, should have been bipolar disorder. Is that
Yeah,
right?
she's within the bipolar spectrum. And yes, and again, it's not just a matter of what diagnosis you put down on an insurance form. Diagnosis makes a difference in how you treat people. There's different treatment between major depression and bipolar disorder. And if you're not treating them properly, it's not going to happen.
What led you to the diagnosis of bipolar disorder specifically with Tammy?
Well, the first was the question in my mind, why isn't she getting any better? Why is she in this situation where she's failed all these rehabilitation attempts, where the antidepressants don't seem to work? It's sort of like digging a well. You're digging a well, it's dry, you keep digging, it's dry, you dig some more, it's still dry. At some point you think, maybe I'm digging in the wrong place. Maybe this is a dry hole. So I often see people in my clinical practice who refer to me because they're not getting better. They're treatment resistant. And then the question is, why? Is something being missed? Are they being treated for the wrong thing? Are they not on the proper? Is something going wrong in the treatment?
But what he's saying now is,
And that's what I thought of.
it wouldn't
when I
help her
started talking to
even if
her
she
about
gets
this.
medication and help.
And I inquired carefully about bipolar symptoms, and they came through. And it's consistent with what we know in psychiatry, that people don't report being manic. They like being manic, they feel good, so it's often missed. And I'll just note parenthetically, it's interesting that Dr. Fabian independently reached the same diagnosis as me, completely independent. I had no idea of his testing or what he had found, and yet we reached essentially identical conclusions as to diagnosis.
What is dual diagnosis?
Dual diagnosis simply refers to having both psychiatric and substance use issues. And I think I touched on this before, that they tend to feed in each other. That people with severe anxiety, depression, mania often use substances to self-medicate. But the relevance in treatment is that if you only treat one and not the other, they're probably not going to get better. So if someone has serious substance use issues and you put them in rehab, but you don't treat the depression, anxiety, bipolar, their risk of relapse is high. Similarly, if I put somebody on the right medicine for their mental illness, but they're still drinking or drugging, they're probably going to relapse. Their mental illness probably will not benefit because
Yeah, and he said she had been complete abstinence when she's been in prison before, but she relapses the second she comes
Why
out.
did Tammy keep failing at rehab?
So,
First, I have to admit, she had a very severe alcohol use disorder.
it's,
Certainly not
to me,
mild,
I can't see her getting
which
as
the more
a
severe
better
the illness,
treatment
the tougher it is to treat, I have to
by coming out of prison early
But also,
to
it's
go
my
into
opinion that she had a psychiatric
psychological
illness that was not
help, because
addressed
she
and
would just
treated,
start drinking again. She did it
contributed to
before.
need to self-medicate, and contributed to relapses.
And in your opinion, if she had been properly diagnosed and treated, could the efforts at rehabilitation, could they have been successful?
It certainly would have increased the likelihood of success in getting her off of this pattern of relapses, illness, and continued substance use.
That's just speculation.
A fighting chance of getting better. Of course, I can't predict with certainty what would have happened. I have to acknowledge that. But with proper treatment, treating the right diagnosis at the right time with substance use treatment would have given her a much better chance to do well and get clean.
What criteria did you use to diagnose her with bipolar disorder?
I use the DSM-5 TR criteria. The TR is the text revision. The criteria is which has changed the accompanying dicta and commentary and added a few new diagnoses, but the criteria are the same.
And would you briefly go over with the court the criteria?
Sure. First, in bipolar disorder, one has to have at least a manic or hypomanic episode. And it is a disorder of mood, and the core symptom is a mood that is either elated, euphoric, or expansive, and or persistently irritable. For hypomania, the symptoms must last at least 4 days, for mania at least a week. And the distinction between hypomania and mania is essentially the symptoms are more severe in mania, and usually you end up either with serious consequences in jail, in a psychiatric hospital, or in psychotic symptoms. That's essentially the difference between hypomania and mania. And in addition to the core mood disorder, symptoms include such things as pressured speech, a flight of ideas and disordered flow of thought, increased motor behavior and restlessness, reckless spending and other reckless behavior, heedless of consequences, markedly increased energy despite less of the need for sleep, racing thoughts. Some individuals with mania can have psychotic symptoms, that the inflated self-esteem, which is part of mania, can develop to grandiosity. People think they are Jesus, have profound religious insights, are very wealthy, have fantastic talents or abilities, and this may lead them into very serious consequences, busted marriages, lost jobs, criminal embezzlement, criminal charges. In addition, the symptoms must cause either significant distress or impairment in functioning and not be due to substances or any other medical issues.
What information did you have from her past that led you to conclude that she did have manic, hypomanic episode?
Well, again, much of it is by self-report. I mean, I'll acknowledge there's not good documentation as to manic episodes. I have to acknowledge that. But that's very typical because, again, most people who are in a manic phase don't come in. They feel great unless they get arrested or end up in the hospital because they're running around doing dangerous things. So, again, it's based on several things, which would be the failure of previous treatment, or history, what Dr. Fabian reported about information from family. And of course, as he said, the results of this psychological testing were not suggestive of malingering, symptom exaggeration, or deception. So you put all of those things together, and look, I'm a psychiatrist, I practice. Had she been my patient? She's not. I'm here in a forensic setting. Would this, in my opinion, be most consistent with a bipolar illness, which would explain many things, fit the facts, and know why she didn't get better? Yes, more likely than not. Reasonable degree of medical certainty. Maybe Sytch is in the bipolar spectrum.
Can you explain what medications are used to treat bipolar disorder?
Sure. We use mood stabilizing medications, which are distinct from antidepressants. The classic mood stabilizing medication is lithium, which is actually an element found in the Earth's crust. But when it's put in a lithium salt form, you get lithium carbonate. In proper doses, it can stabilize bipolar disorder. Other mood stabilizing agents include certain seizure disorders, such as Depakote and Tegretol and Trileptal, which not only are effective anti-seizure agents, but also work in bipolar disorder. And then many of the antipsychotic medications, which are used in the treatment of schizophrenia, also turn out to be effective in bipolar disorder. And these would be medications such as Seroquel, Latuda, Vraylar, Risperdal, Zyprexa, all of which are useful. And we use these medications not only to treat the acute episode, so if somebody comes in manic or depressed, we treat it, but we also use it for what's called prophylaxis or prevention. So we like to keep people on the medicine to try to prevent future episodes. So we use these mood stabilizing medications both for the treatment of someone who's actively ill, as well as we keep them on it even when they're doing well to try to prevent or prophylax against future episodes.
Now, historically, when she was prescribed an antidepressant rather than the medications you just described, why did that cause the worsening of symptoms?
Well, if you look at the practice guidelines for the treatment of bipolar disorder, generally antidepressants, sometimes they help. Often they don't work, and often they make things inadvertently worse. So if someone comes in depressed, the bipolar isn't recognized, they're put on an antidepressant, it can make them more irritable, put them into a manic phase.
It's getting cold in Denmark.
It often makes them worse. So the practice guidelines are you should not use an antidepressant alone in bipolar disorder, you should use a mood stabilizer. The data actually, even on adding antidepressants to a mood stabilizer, is mixed, and the general recommendation is do it with caution. It might help, it might not. But treating a bipolar spectrum individual with an antidepressant alone, not recommended.
All right, council, it's just about 11:30. Is this maybe a good stepping point?
Yes, Judge.
I do agree with Dr. Dancing on the stand. Everybody will confer with him during break. And since he's the testimony.
Yes, Judge.
All right, an hour and 15 minutes? Is it about 12:45?
That's fine.
All right, we'll recess until 12:45.
She doesn't look like she did back in the day.
No.
But I can see that the place I have the feed from has stopped sending. So I'll end this stream. If they are putting up the afternoon, I will jump onto that as well. But everyone, go out, have your dinner, and we'll be back later to see where this end. You too, Jamie. Go have something to eat.
I'm just working.
Working, raw hard. I don't know why I got that in my brain the other day. But everyone, these were most of the experts so far. EGA, well, as I understand it, it should be within not that long. Didn't she say 12 something?
Did she?
I think she said 12:35 or 12:45. So, but there's no stream live, so it has to be live. And then, but if you subscribe to me or you're a member of MLS's Discord or you are on Twitter, I will tell you when I go live. I might just grab me a bit better to eat and be a little late if it starts in 20 minutes. So I might be a little late, but I'll make some dinner real fast so I can go again.
Yeah.
Hopefully there will be a feed.
Just, I like it when we can fast forward through the boring stuff.
I do too. But everyone, thank you so much for being here. Do all the YouTube things and follow me on Twitter so you can see when I go live again. And show Jamie a little love if you can, because she's so lovely.
Thanks, guys.
Bye all.
Bye.